Matt and Greg used to interview movie stars, but now they're doing a podcast.
Hey everyone, I'm Matt Levitz.
I'm Greg Strzewski.
Nope, that's actually not true. I forgot to tell you, Greg.
What happened?
We are changing your name.
What?
I came up with a better one.
Okay,
ready?
Okay. Yes.
All right. So because you do two different podcasts and you talk all the time, so instead of Greg, it's going to be Greg Word, because you use a lot of different words. Then because you type for a living, like, you know, when you write articles for your Deepest Dream website, you use your hands a lot. So instead of Sriza Vosti, it's going to be Sriza Hands. Greg Word Sriza Hands.
Oh, Greg Word Scissorhands.
Greg Word Scissorhands.
Oh, I like that.
Cool. So everyone out there, please start using this.
Greg Word Scissorhands sounds like a really cool film.
Yep, we're going to make this a thing. Okay. So anyway, everyone, welcome to another episode of Matt and Greg Word Used to Interview Movie Stars. See, Greg, it's catching on. People are using it already.
Very, very catchy, Matt. You're the brains behind the operation.
Okay, then.
Tim Burton copyright right there. I don't know about that one.
Today's episode, we are doing... You remember what movie we're doing?
The Silence of the Lambs.
Perfect. And to be clear, everyone, the first word of the title is the word the. It often gets left off because Silence of the Lambs is so much easier to say.
Yes.
But no, the actual title is The Silence of the Lambs.
Yes.
The more you know.
And in fact, doing my research, which is minuscule compared to yours, Matt, I had to figure out when I typed on IMDb, do I say silence or the silence?
Really?
Yeah. I always thought.
And if you did it wrong, it wouldn't come up?
Funny, but I was just like, oh, it's the. So
the page is like, what movie could you possibly be talking about? I'm so confused. All right. So on the show today, we're going to have Anthony Held, Cassie Lemmons, Scott Glenn, Jodie Foster, and Anthony Hopkins.
Very cool.
So Greg, are you a fan of this movie?
Huge fan. Huge fan. Yeah, and you know, eventually I'm going to do a couple of quick little takes on why this movie actually Jodie Foster was very important in my formative years.
What do you think makes Silence of the Lambs such a classic?
Well, you know, the fact that I guess it's a critically acclaimed movie, but there's very few thrillers.
But to you?
To me, there's very few. I'm a huge thriller fan. So this movie just checked off all the boxes for me. Performance-wise, the tension and the pacing, the iconic characters, probably Clarice and Lecter are probably one of the most popular, most famous, iconic duos in Hollywood history. And I knew the first time I saw it in the theater that it was going to be a classic. How did you feel that way the first time you saw it?
I didn't see it in the theater. I saw it later on video, but and by that point it was already a phenomenon, so I didn't discover it. But yeah, I mean, it's very well done. And
I remember back in the day of being a fan of Jonathan Demme for because he did Marriage to the Mob, and I can't believe that he actually directed The Silence of the Lambs, and I was always wondering where his career would go after this film.
Yeah, because prior to this, he was kind of doing lightweight stuff, right?
Yeah, lightweight stuff, and you know, he was very critically acclaimed, but it was a select group. Like if you're a fan of the Talking Heads, then you're going to love Stop Making Sense, right?
Sure.
But there's a lot of people who weren't a fan of that. Or maybe Married to the Mob, even though it was Michelle Pfeiffer and Matthew Modine, that was an acclaimed film, but it didn't have a broad reach like The Silence of the Lambs did.
And actually, I was going to get to this in a minute, but Jonathan Demme did not participate in this junket. We don't have him.
Right.
But everyone talks about him, and he's such a huge presence. I mean, just like a few episodes ago, we talked about Elaine May in the same way for The Birdcage, that she wasn't there, but everyone talked about her.
Exactly, yes.
So he is very much in today's show. So, I mean, do you want to talk about him a little bit as a director? Because you're the director guy. You always know this stuff.
I'm the director guy. Well, you know what? There's a lot. Actually, after taping this episode, Matt, one of the things I wanted to do tonight, and this is not a joke, was I actually wanted to watch I wanted to actually hunt down a couple of Jonathan Demme films on Netflix and Amazon Prime. I know you recently rewatched The Silence of the Lambs on Netflix, correct?
No, I think I've got it on video.
Oh, you've got it on video, yeah. So I think it's on Netflix right now. So I'm definitely waiting to check it out. But I've actually interviewed Demme once, and I remember him to be a very...
What was the film?
I'm trying to remember the film specifically. I think it was the remake of The Manchurian Candidate. No, it was this film called The Truth About Charlie. Okay. I don't know if you remember this film. It starred...
The name sounds familiar.
It starred Mark Wahlberg and Tanday Newton, and Mark Wahlberg was trying to do a riff on Cary Grant. It was The Truth About Charlie was a riff on those Cary Grant movies like Charade and those charming thrillers that he used to do. And Demi tried to shoehorn Mark Wahlberg into that type of role. And Wahlberg was actually very uncomfortable. He did not actually like that film.
So you feel he didn't pull it off?
He didn't pull it off. I really enjoyed the movie, and
All right.
and I really enjoy it. And it's sad that we don't have Demi for this segment, because he was a very well-spoken interview, and he's a huge cinephile like you and I. Obviously, probably a little bit more, because he not only is a director, he was a huge fan of movies. And
you're using past tense. He's no longer with us.
Yeah, he's no longer with us. Yeah, and you know what? Actually, back in 2014, I love Demi so much. He actually executive produced this film called Song 1 with Anne Hathaway, and right. And a couple of questions I asked. One of the questions I asked Anne Hathaway was, what was it like working with Jonathan Demme? Because they actually worked together, not just on Song 1, but Demme directed her in Rachel Getting Married, which landed Anne Hathaway an Oscar nomination, right? And she said about Demme, out of any person she's met, Demme had the best taste of anyone she had ever met. So whenever they would talk over the phone, he would say, "Have you seen this new gallery, this new opening, or this new film?" She said he had impeccable taste. So even though, like you said, Demi's not part of the interviews, his presence is felt.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so getting back to Silence of the Lambs, the film was nominated for 7 Academy Awards, and it won 5 of them. And they were Best Picture, Best Actor for Anthony Hopkins, Best Actress for Jodie Foster, Best Director for Jonathan Demme, and Best Adapted Screenplay for Ted Talley. The 2 that it didn't win were Best Sound Mixing and Best Film Editing. And if you remember the 1992 Oscars, and really who doesn't, Billy Crystal, who was hosting, started the show off getting wheeled in wearing a straitjacket and mask exactly like Hannibal Lecter in the film. And this is a clip that's often used in Oscar montages. The image is probably just as iconic for Billy Crystal's career as it is for Anthony Hopkins.
Wow! Yes, I just remembered. I have the visual. That was very funny. That was a very funnily done thing. I'm going to add to that, along with its Oscar wins.
Yeah.
It also, the budget for the film was $19 million.
All right.
And it made $272 million worldwide back in '91.
So in Hollywood circles, that would be considered a profit.
Yes. Yeah. You're very good at math.
Yeah.
Math.
Okay.
Man. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So a little profit for the movie.
Huh. Okay. Now you guys have to remember when you listen to this episode that even though this movie and these performances have become so iconic in our culture, at the time that these interviews took place, nobody had seen it yet. This junket happened on January 25th, 1991, and the movie opened on February 14th, 3 weeks later. So all of these actors are in a headspace of not yet knowing whether it's going to be a hit or a huge embarrassing bomb. They've seen it and they're proud of it, but they have no idea what to expect from audience reaction. And so that's a completely different perspective than they would have if you were to ask these guys the exact same questions today. When the movie came out, it was a phenomenon, and it remains so all these years later. But what we're about to hear is a moment of time with all of these actors immediately before that happened. So that being said, I guess it's time to move on to our first 2, which are going to be Anthony Held and Cassie Lemmons. I am assuming that everyone listening to this show has seen the movie, but maybe not for a while. I mean, as you said, Greg, I watched it again a few weeks ago, but prior to that, I hadn't seen it since it opened. Since many of you listeners are probably in the same boat, we're going to refresh your memories about who these characters were and the parts that they played in the story. Be forewarned, we're going to get into some spoiler territory, but really, if you haven't seen The Silence of the Lambs by now, that's on you.
Wow. Okay.
And if you haven't, why are you listening to this? What is the appeal? It must be us.
Our chemistry.
Yeah, that's it. So we're going to get into their credits in a minute. First, I will tell you that Anthony Held plays Dr. Frederick Chilton, who is the smarmy guy at the prison who is in charge of Hannibal Lecter. If you remember, he's the guy who accidentally leaves his pen in Lecter's cell, which is what allows him to escape a little later on. Chilton is kind of a huge condescending jerk throughout the movie, so in a way you kind of don't mind when the very last scene of the film is Lecter telling Starling on the phone that he's about to have an old friend for dinner, and then he hangs up and starts following Chilton as the credits begin to roll. As for Cassie Lemmons, she played Adriella Mapp, who was training for the FBI with Starling, and the 2 of them were friends and roommates. They've got a few scenes together that allowed Jodie Foster to get some exposition dialogue out. If you're trying to get a mental image, she was a young African-American woman with dreadlocks. Actually, she's still an African-American woman with dreadlocks. She's just not quite as young. This is 28 years later, after all. It was actually a pretty small role, but after this movie, Lemmons went on to have quite a good career both in front of and behind the camera. Greg, I'm sure you remember, you and I interviewed her together for a movie she directed called Eve's Bayou.
Loved Eve's Bayou. She received a lot of critical acclaim for that.
Yes, with a little 11-year-old Journey Smollett.
Right. Were you going to share a story from Eve's Bayou?
No, I mean, I don't think we've ever heard from anyone from that family ever again.
Oh.
That was the last of the Smolletts.
No, yeah, Smollett. Yeah, Smollett was great. She was great in that movie, but she became a really successful filmmaker. So
Kasi Lemmons.
Kasi Lemmons, yes. She also directed Talk to Me.
All right.
And Black Nativity. So.
Well, anything you also want to tell us about her or about Anthony Held?
Well, you know what the thing about Anthony Held is. This was such a popular role for him, and most people really remember him for this role in The Silence of the Lambs, and later he would return to the role in Red Dragon.
Right.
Okay.
2002, the prequel film.
Yes, and then also, here's the thing: Lemmons, before she became a filmmaker, she was also actually after The Silence of the Lambs. Around that era, she starred in a couple of high-profile films. Candyman being the most popular one, and then the Jean-Claude Van Damme film Hard Target, which I actually did the press junket for. I don't remember interviewing her for Hard Target, though.
She might not have been there.
Right, she might not have been there. But the thing with Held is, while most people remember him for that character, a lot of his stuff was post-Silence, was spent in the theater, being a character actor. But he's best also known for his work on the TV series, which at the time was popular, Boston Public, which ran from 2000 to 2004.
Yep, I wrote that down. He played Deputy Principal Scott Gruber. He also had a recurring role as Judge Cooper on both The Practice and Boston Legal. You mentioned his theater. He was nominated for Tony Awards twice, for the 1988 Broadway production of Anything Goes and the 1995 production of Terrence McNally's Love, Valor, Compassion. He had small but memorable roles on the Cheers series finale and in X-Men The Last Stand, where he was an FBI agent questioning Mystique. But definitely his bread and butter comes from narrating audiobooks. He's done well over 100 of them, and more than a third of those are in the Star Wars universe. If you've ever listened to a Star Wars audiobook, chances are very good it was him.
Wow. Very cool. Very cool.
So that's all I've got. Greg, anything you want to add?
That's it. Before we get into the first interview, little extra, the Silence of the Lambs factoid, which I found online, was Gene Hackman was originally set to
play Clarice?
Yeah,
that would have been really interesting.
No, he was actually set, I believe, to star and direct in the film. And I think he was going to play the Scott Glenn character. Okay. But one of the reasons why he didn't take it was because he had just played an agent in Mississippi Burning. So he actually purchased the rights to the film, but then several days later he realized there might have been too much of a copycat with that, and he just left the project altogether. So little fact.
So he turned around like days later.
Yeah, days later. That's what I saw on this fact. And this is not a fake news site. It's actually a reputable site. So that little interesting thing I never knew about. But speaking of which, without further ado, Matt, here is Anthony Held and Kasi Lemmons.
Testing 1 2 testing.
We're ready. Thank you.
Okay.
You play a very nasty piece of work in this film. How did it feel to see him looming up behind you at the end of the picture?
I love the end of the picture. I really love the how much is left to the imagination. I think it's one of the strengths of the film, and what makes the film a scary film is that Jonathan has elected to leave so much to the imagination. There was an ending written that was not actually shot, where Lecter has got Chilton tied up in a chair with a gag, and opens up a penknife and starts torturing him. And it's very wise to instead go to this other choice. And I think the last image of the film, as the camera rises on this ominous weather, when the day we shot it, the clouds were rolling in, and it's that wonderful sort of having an old friend for dinner joke that happens at the end. And the fact that I found, and I don't know if you found it to be true, that I was rooting for Lecter at the end of this film. And to be rooting for Lecter at the end of the film is a triumph of the filmmaker's art. So,
Or a triumph of sociopathy.
yes.
What was it about this character that made you want to do this part?
Working with Jonathan Demme, really, when I first heard that the project was being done and that he actually wanted to meet me, I was thrilled. And then I read the book before. I was working up at Stockbridge, Massachusetts, doing a production of Betrayal. And I went down to the local drugstore and got a copy of the book, and I read it in one sitting. And I thought, I want to do Chilton. I want to do Chilton. Because I thought I always play sympathetic characters. I usually play kind of nerdy, nice guys in films. And I thought, I really want to play a nasty character for once and see if I can break out of this mold. And when I went down and met with Jonathan, he asked me, what character appeals to you? And I said, Chilton. I would love to do Chilton. And Chilton was written much older. He was supposed to be a man in his 50s. And so he asked me what other characters appealed to me. And I said, one of the bug guys would be fun, But several weeks later, they had a reading of the script with Jodie, and I don't think anybody else that was actually ended up being in the film was in the reading, but a lot of actors that were kind of brought in to do the reading so that they could hear the script. And they asked me if, as a favor, I would read Lecter. And I thought, oh, what a wonderful opportunity to sink your teeth into a role like that. And so I felt very free and very much like I could do whatever I wanted in the reading, and I had a great time. And afterwards, they offered me Chilton, and I was delighted.
Is there a fine line between sane and insane? You're just on the other side of the the locked door, basically. I mean, was that taken into account at all?
I'm sure that that is part of Thomas Harris's vision and Ted Talley's vision, and probably part of Jonathan's vision. From my perspective, the character is completely sane, just very ambitious. And the trick, I think, when you play an unsympathetic character is to find ways to like the character. I like this character. I mean, I think that from his perspective, he's doing the right thing. He's pursuing his career. He's trying to solve his cases. He'd like to get a little bit closer to this attractive FBI cadet, but who could blame him? I think as soon as an actor playing an unsympathetic character, you try to play unsympathetic, you start kind of pushing it into the audience's face. The audience wants to do a lot of work. The audience wants to play detective and figure things out about characters. And one of the real instructive things about watching fine actors like Jodie and Tony Hopkins is to see how simple they are in what they do and how much they leave to the audience.
Was there more of your role shot than is in the film? It looks like she had more support from you, that she had spoken to you more often by the time your big scene.
I think it's important that you know that they're good friends and that this is somebody she can come to in a pinch. But I think it's important in this film that she just come in that instance when she's really concerned about the life of her friend. That, here's this guy on the loose. They've obviously talked about it,
right, out
of script, and that now it's important that we figure it out right now because he's going to come and get you. So no, if this is the script that when I got the job, this was the script, and it all ended up in the movie, and that was it. I think that it's good if you get the feeling that they have a relationship.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the different directorial styles between maybe a Jonathan Demme and a Spike Lee?
I think that they have similarities, actually, because both of them are very, very low-key, never, ever yell. Spike is very calm, like this. Jonathan has a lot of energy, but it's quiet energy. Jonathan is very loving and supportive. He makes a really loving atmosphere with lots of laughter, and you feel like you're part of a family, and you feel loved. And by the time you're shooting your scene, you know that whatever direction he gives is absolutely the right way to go. And he creates an atmosphere of trust. Spike lays back as if the movie is happening without him. You forget he's the director, and then he'll call for, are the lights ready? But just like that, are you ready with those lights yet? He's very subtle, a subtle presence, and Spike is not an actor's director. He's a different kind of director. I mean, he sees the whole movie, and it's his film, But the similarity is that they're both very, very relaxed and warm and kind, not nasty or aggressive or.
And how did you become involved in this project?
I had heard about it. I picked up the script and the book, read them in a weekend, and Monday I called my agent and I said, no, I'm going to do this movie. I'm going to do it. Howard Fear, the casting director, wanted somebody tough. I was like, I can be tough. This is a job that I really want to be involved in. And when I met Jonathan, we just connected, and it's been great.
Anthony, from everything we've heard, is that the atmosphere surrounding the making of the film was very low key compared to the subject matter, which was fairly intense. In many scenes, you are in Anthony Hopkins' face. From what I understand, that when the camera wasn't rolling, you guys were not in that space. Are there any moments where you are confronting him and then the camera stops and this reality takes over, perhaps a joke or something?
Well, yeah, especially in the the scene where he's in that mask, that kind of catcher's mask sort of thing that presses his nose down, which was terribly uncomfortable for him to be wearing, and he was standing for a long period of time. He was in a straitjacket as well. It was just a terribly uncomfortable scene to be doing, and we were in this very small cell with a lot of people around, and I think we were shooting very late at night. It must have been 1 or 2. No, I think it was like 3 or 4 in the morning, and we were doing that scene. And it's sort of in circumstances like that, it becomes crucial when the camera stops rolling to lighten the atmosphere, to kind of. So there's a great deal of joking and of conversation that had nothing to do with what we were doing. I can't remember specifics about what we talked about it, but it could be a recipe for a fish dish, or what it's like in Athens, or just anything that takes you out of that room, out of that costume, out of that subject matter, and into the real world. It's one of, I think, for both Tony and for Jodie, their real strengths as actors is the great intelligence that they both have and that they bring to their work, and the reality that their lives have. They're neither of them actors who are obsessed with acting and with career. The fact that Jodie was a comparative literature major at Yale, acting is not all they think about, and not all they talk about, and they're very fascinating people to be around because of that.
One thing about this movie is that for the artist, it will be a haunting experience for times to come. And I wonder if for you as actors, while you read the book and you read the script, and not necessarily during the filming, because as we all say, it was a very light experience after the camera stopped rolling. But was that something that haunted you for many weeks after you read the book or read the script?
The most haunting thing for me was while we were shooting at Quantico, we took lectures with John Douglas, who is kind of the man that Scott Glenn's character is based on. And he wrote a book called Sexual Homicide, plainly and simply, which is about 100 case studies. And I read the book while we were shooting. And that has stayed with me. I don't think it will ever leave. It was remarkably horrifying because it's real life. A real man who skinned his victims and made drums out of them, and hundreds of stories like these and interviews with these people. And so that's something that I think stays with you.
Originally, Scott's part was written for a guy that was much older. Originally, yours was written for someone that was much older. Was yours originally written for a black woman?
It was written for a black woman in the book. She's Ardelia Mapp, and she's Clarice's best friend and contemporary.
Did you meet any female FBI agents?
Sure, lots of them.
Yeah.
There are lots of women in the FBI. At Quantico, you have Marines and DEA and FBI, and there are many more women in the FBI than there are in the Marines or the DEA. Lots of women, black women, and they were great.
Any surprises in talking to them? Anything you hadn't expected?
I think that they were more kind of regular people than I don't know what I expected, but they had made this big deal. Howard Fuhr, the casting director, he wants you to be tough, and I was like, okay, I'm tough, and then I went down there and I thought, well, they're not so tough. They were just regular people. They had very interesting lives, I think. I think that they're completely involved in what they're doing and completely dedicated, and it opened me up to meet people that did this for a living. This was their life, because I don't consider them really, and now I do.
Were they open with you?
Yeah, very open, very interested, very open. Sometimes they kid around or say, yeah, right. But mostly they were very helpful. Now, Harris, the guy that wrote these books, spent a lot of time working with the FBI, and so they were used to it. The fiction coming from actual research on the FBI, and so by the time we came, they were welcome. Let me show you how to shoot a gun.
And did you do any research in that sense as well?
No, I didn't. I was doing a play called Lisbon Traviata in Manhattan with an actor named Dan Butler, who ended up playing one of the butterfly experts, the guy with the glasses who cuts open the thing. And he got so involved in doing research into whatever the science of bugs is called, and was reading all these books and talking to all these experts and things. I find if I do too much research for a role, it ties me up in knots. I'm always looking over my shoulder, checking myself. Am I being true to what my research has told me? Of course, that varies from role to role.
Right.
But with this role, my approach was to understand in the script what the character was after, and try and find what made the character tick and what I could like about the character, and then pretty much let the reality of the environment speak for itself.
And also, all the actors we interviewed for this told us that Jonathan Lemmons was always very open to suggestions, and he was very open to cooperation. I would like to have your points of view with that.
He really is a collaborator, and it's a wonderful experience to have that opportunity to collaborate with a great artist. The whole process of rehearsing for a film is so different from, I do so much stage in proportion to film. And rehearsing for stage is a process of going through from the beginning to the end every day, over and over, so that you really get a kind of an over. When you're rehearsing for a film, you may read through the thing 2 or 3 times, but then it's all out of sequence, and you gather to do a short snip a minute and a half of the film, and you go over it 4 or 5 times to get the physical relationships, and then you shoot it, and it's a much different process. I find as an actor that it becomes really crucial to trust the person who has the overview. On stage, I'm so used to working with bad directors that I've gotten to the point where I can sort of direct myself. But with film, especially in a character that appears throughout the film, who has some kind of progression to it, I really need to trust the director. I really need to know that somebody has an overview and will guide me through from scene to scene and say, well, no, at this point in the film, we need this from you. Because the danger when you play a small role in a film is that you will try and make an impression. You'll be working too hard, that you'll be screaming in every shot, look at me, look at me. And it really, successful film work, I think, is done when you kind of throw it away, when the audience feels that they're the only one who saw you do that. And that's why being able to trust a director as much as you're able to trust Jonathan, and working with an actress like Jodie, who is a master at doing nothing. You watch her in front of the camera and you think, oh, what a flat, uninteresting performance this scene is going to be. She doesn't seem to be doing a thing. I can't even really hear her. And then you see it on the screen and there's so much going on.
Thought, thinking in the eyes.
She's not pushing it in your face.
And Cassie, your views on working with Jonathan as a collaborative effort?
Yeah, definitely. But by the same token, I think that there are some films that I've gone into with a very strong opinion of how something should be played, and the director says one thing to me, and I'm like, no, that's not quite right. Jonathan, again, the sense of trust that I had in Jonathan, that ultimately he was right, that what he said was right on. But definitely we collaborated and tried scenes different ways, and I said what I wanted to do, and then he said, do it that way, then do it my way.
Would you say that Spike Lee would work the same way in terms of having collaboration?
Yeah, I think Spike takes a lot of collaboration. They rehearse and improvise on most of his scripts. A lot of his scripts involve a lot of improvisation. But Spike is not so much, to me, and he doesn't work with the actors like Jonathan does. Jonathan is very specific about performance, he's an actor's director. He's one of the ultimates to me.
Can you comment on Anthony's performance, please?
Well, it's a glorious role. Lecter is a role to die for, and it's a very difficult and dangerous role as well, because it's very easy to go over the top with it. You have to be brilliant. The character has to be brilliant. Well, how do you play brilliance? It helps to be brilliant, but it's a character who has extraordinary powers, and the powers have to be really shown, demonstrated through the eyes and through the voice. And Tony has an ability as an actor to achieve a very, very high level of concentration. It was clear when we would be doing a scene that he was able to create a kind of a bubble around himself, that where he had, you're surrounded by 50 technicians. You've got this big camera staring you in the face. You have all these activities going on around you before the shot happens, and to be able to turn all that off and achieve total concentration, it's very difficult. And I think you can only play a role like Lecter if you have successfully, if you have that capacity. I think it's one of his great strengths as an actor.
Did you learn anything from him as an actor?
Yeah, yes, an enormous amount. I think basically what I learned is about concentration. Watching him concentrate, watching him take such delight in what he was doing, and watching the economy with which he both Tony and Jodie, the great economy of making the moments count. Not trying to load everything into every moment, letting things kind of just be very simple and very spare, which I think suggests enormous strength.
Did you have any qualms about being the one to leave the pen on the bed?
Oh no!
I mean, how the heck does he get the pen?
I leave it on the bed. I mean, it's an oversight on my character's part that
one that he didn't seem like he would do.
Oh, you mean did it seem out of character for me? No, I think it's one of those lapses that happen when your concentration is where it shouldn't be. He's intent on controlling the Lecter character, and just it's out of his field of vision. It's out of his circle of concentration. It's a lapse. But it was interesting. The night we shot that scene, we finished my last thing, and Tony and I were broken, and I was heading off to get out of costume and makeup and go back to the hotel. It was 5:30 in the morning or something, and I was just about to get into the car, and they called me back up to the set, because in shooting the last shot of coming in on the pen, they realized that the file folder that was left there had a metal clip on it, and that would not have been in Lecter's. You don't bring any metal into his cell, and we had to reshoot to take that moment out. Which indicated to me that those kind of lapses happen to everybody. It's not at all out of the question for my character to have forgotten about that pen. And I kept trying to introduce the pen in other scenes, so that my character always has this pen. And Jonathan kept saying, "It's all right. Don't work so hard on the pen.
Easy on the pen."
That one scene is enough.
Yes, don't push it in the audience's face.
How do you expect he got that pen?
Lecter?
Yeah.
How does he know that she wears lait du temps? How does he know that I'm going to end up on that tropical island? Lecter knows. Lecter has powers that we can only guess at. It's one of his joys as a screen villain. I think it's one of the things that makes us root for him at the end. We love powerful characters, and he's a powerful character.
Just waiting for the right moment. It's as if he's been there just waiting all those years for the right moment, and this is it.
Did you, for your own mind, have any story in mind of how Chilton had got into this very antagonistic position, which ultimately would thwart his attempts to get into the mind collector?
Well, my attitude was that he's not a doctor. I mean, he's not a medical doctor. That he's, maybe a psychologist, or that he's got a PhD, but not an MD, and that he's one of those people who rises to the highest level of incompetence, or whatever that principle is, Peter principle. I think he's definitely underqualified for his position, but he's also intensely ambitious, and has been at this institution for a really long time. And the only thing that he's got really is Lecter. He's got one of the really famous mass murderers under his control, and it's sort of like his pet. I think he takes great proprietary interest in kind of showing him off. He says it's so rare to capture one alive, from a research point of view. I think he's just delighted with Lecter, but he wishes he had more control over him. All I can really do is keep him in that cell and play evangelist programs to him. And I think he'd much prefer to have control of Lecter's mind.
But he's not clever enough.
No, is anybody clever enough?
Individually, what's up for both of you next?
I start rehearsals in a week for a production of Pygmalion that's happening at the Roundabout Theater off Broadway in New York, where I'll be playing Henry Higgins. I have a CBS School Break special that'll be coming on in April, where I play a dentist who's been sexually abusing his daughter for 7 or 8 years. Continuing my career of unsympathetic character.
Yeah, right.
Dysfunctional people.
Yeah.
I just finished 11 episodes, or I'm just finishing the 11th episode of Undercover, which is a new CIA series with Linda Brown and Anthony Dennison.
How would you compare working on television and film?
Oh, I think they are so completely different. Most of the time, television is shot so fast that most of the time you really have to hit the marks. And if the camera is good and you hit your marks, and that's pretty much a buy. You don't get the kind of personal. Also, to talk about making a film like this with Jonathan Demme, who's one of the greatest directors, ever, as far as I'm concerned, for the actor. It's different than making other films that I've done. So it's like a night and day experience, like a different medium completely, just they're not even connected. Because I really felt I was working with a director. Yeah. And that's not a feeling that you get very often in television.
Yeah, in film, you may shoot a page and a half, page and 3/4, maybe 2 pages a day. But in television, you really have to shoot 9 to 10 pages a day. So the number of setups for each scene, the number of takes for each setup are greatly reduced when you work in television, and it really does become a question of eliminating mistakes rather than exploring successes.
Right. And also must be more demanding for the actors to memorize the lines for television because they're shooting so much more.
Yeah, I guess everybody has their difficulties. Everybody's different. Lines have never been one of my difficulties. Hitting those marks. Now sometimes that's tricky for me. Just rushing through a performance in TV. Sometimes you don't even have the script when you start shooting it. You don't know how it's going to end, and the pages are coming to you. As you're working, it's a completely different process than having a script for a month and talking with the director and having read-throughs and getting that feedback. And not to mention Demme's brilliance.
Do you ever give any thought as to why people who run mental institutions and prisons are always totally unsympathetic figures? Is that a movie convention, or do we really hate such people? What does it say about us?
I don't know. It's a very interesting question. My father-in-law is a psychiatrist, and he is adored by everyone who knows him. I mean, he's and most of the psychiatrists that I've had contact with and mental health professionals have been people that I find to be very warm people I feel very safe with. I think it's sort of crucial. For the purposes of this film, you have 2 villains, one of whom is killed at the end, the character that Ted Levine plays, and one of whom becomes sort of a strange hero to the audience by the end of the film. And then you have this sort of slime bucket that I play, who sort of has to be unsympathetic in a way to make the Hopkins character more sympathetic, so that by the end you are rooting for him to kill him. I hate him too. So I think it's less. The film is not taking a stand about people who head mental institutions are nasty people.
But they always are in movies.
Well, I guess I haven't seen enough of them to know. I think authority figures in general are people that we have trouble identifying with and feeling sympathetic toward.
One more question, please.
That it? Okay, great. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're back. That is Cassie
Hello again.
Lemmons. Hello, that's Cassie Lemmons and Anthony Held. Hopefully you guys really enjoyed the interview. Yeah. Matt, you have some postscripts?
Yeah, a little bit. Let's see. Anthony Held couldn't remember what the science of bugs is called. For those of you playing along at home, the word is entomology.
Okay, very good.
Greg, now you've learned something.
Yes.
Something I picked up on, he talked about a scene between him and Hannibal Lecter that had to be reshot because looking back at the footage, somebody noticed that the file folder he was holding had some metal in it. So they had to fix that and do it again. Nowadays, they would just take that out digitally frame by frame, which would be cheaper and easier than taking another couple of hours on set. But of course, this movie was shot in 1990 when that didn't exist yet. So that's all I've got for postscripts. How about you, Greg?
I just thought it was interesting when he said he actually read the book in one sitting. I don't really think I've ever read one book in a sitting. Maybe because I'm just a movie guy and I never read and I'm illiterate and I'm horrible. But have you ever read a book in one sitting, Matt?
Well, short book, sure. Like reading to the kids, easy.
Oh, but I'm, funny.
No, I know. No, for a long book, like the
Silence of the
like a
Lambs.
500-page book.
Yeah.
I mean, that would probably take me like 80, 90 hours. I don't think I could do that all in one sitting.
Yeah, definitely. So that's it for Anthony Held and Cassie Lemmons. We are now moving on to Scott Glenn.
Right.
Yeah, he plays Jack Crawford, Agent Jack Crawford.
Yeah, Starling's boss. And by the way, he looks totally unlike himself in this movie because he wore glasses. We call that the Clark Kent effect.
Oh, very good.
Which is a close cousin to the She's All That effect, which is when you suddenly look gorgeous just by taking down your ponytail. Which, by the way, that one is also known as the Steven Seagal effect.
That's very funny. Very funny.
Yeah, well, Greg is going to tell you all about Scott Glenn's career, but first, can I tell you my favorite performance of his?
Yes.
It's a pretty recent one. He played Stick on Netflix's Daredevil. He was Matt Murdock's mentor and teacher, and he was awesome. I missed that show already. And I'm guessing a whole bunch of you out there just got your minds blown realizing that Stick was Clarice's boss in The Silence of the Lambs. So, Greg, all right, what else should we know?
Well, I mean, you're right. I just forgot he was so great as Stick in Daredevil. So good.
Yeah.
What a multi-layered character. Well,
and the Defenders, he came back.
Yeah, and he was great in the Defenders. He was great in that too. So,
well, same character.
Yeah, I know, same character. Yeah, MCU. Love it. He got his start as a character actor in the Patty Duke Show all the way back in 1965.
Okay.
And he started off his career doing a lot of television work. And I would say probably some of his more, I guess, getting up there as far as an actor in feature films. He had a small role in the Robert Altman film Nashville. But here's the thing: in 1979, he starred in Apocalypse Now, and he had a small role in that as well. But little Scott Glenn thing is okay. So after Apocalypse Now, I mean, he's had a diverse career. You mentioned Daredevil, Matt. He's been in Urban Cowboy, Cattle Annie, and Little Britches. He was in My Heroes Have Always Been Cowboys, which he mentions during the upcoming interview.
Right. In the interview, he also talks about the Ron Howard film Backdraft.
Oh, yes. And yes, so many movies. Silverado, one of my favorites. You're talking about your favorite performance of Scott Glenn. I love Scott Glenn personally in Silverado. It's a film directed by Lawrence Kasdan and starring Kevin Costner. That's just wonderful to watch. I mean, he was recently been in Castle Rock as well. So Scott Glenn is a working actor as we speak. The Bourne Legacy, he's been in everything, essentially. He's in Sucker Punch, so many things. But I was able to interview Scott Glenn a couple of years after The Silence of the Lambs for a film called Tall Tale, which came out in '95.
I don't think I know that one.
And I actually had a one-on-one interview with Scott Glenn, and I asked him about Apocalypse Now because I dug up some research, like you are wont to do, Matt Levitz, and I realized,
sorry, folks.
That's a great part of the show, Matt. But when I used to do the same thing, I found out that he lived with a tribe in the Philippines called the Ifugao tribe. He actually embedded himself for several months living with the tribe before shooting of Apocalypse Now ever took place. And I decided to ask him about that. I go, please confirm the news. Did this actually happen? And his eyes lit up for a second. He goes, wow, no one has really ever asked me about that. And he just,
that's what makes you Gregwood Scissorhands.
Gregwood Scissorhands. I wish I had the words of Scissorhands for that experience. And if I could, I'd remember it. But he basically elaborated on living in the tribe, getting used to their customs. And even though he had a very small role in Apocalypse, he was saying, it doesn't matter about the small role. I wanted to actually have a real experience in the Philippines. So that was my little factoid with Scott Glenn, who's had an amazing career, but right now we're here to talk about Scott Glenn as Crawford in The Silence of the Lambs.
Right. I do have a couple of things before we get into that. Mid-interview, Gail Murphy asks him kind of an interesting left field question. I think you know where I'm going with this.
No pro quid. Don't pro quid me, Matt.
She asks about the process of looping, and this is actually her agenda question for the day. You're going to hear her ask it of everybody. If you are not familiar with filmmaking terms, you might not know what looping is. Oftentimes when a scene is filmed on location rather than in a studio where you can have better control of the elements, you can wind up with outside noise on your dialogue track, like an airplane flying by or a dog barking or a phone ringing. Sometimes it's a windy day and you can't get good sound in the mics because the wind keeps hitting the microphones. Or if you're filming a scene in the rain, maybe the sound of the water hitting the ground is louder than the actors' voices. There's a lot of things that can ruin audio. So what you have to do then is you loop the dialogue, which means months after filming is done, the actor comes into a recording studio, they play the scene on a giant screen, and the actor says the lines into a microphone, syncing with their own mouth movements on the screen. They'll do this over and over again until the sync is perfect and no one would ever know. And actually, if you remember, Gary Marshall talked about this in our episode for The Princess Diaries, only he used the other term for this, ADR, or automated dialogue replacement. He liked to use it to create new lines of dialogue after the filming was over for moments when the actor was either off camera, far away, or turned away from us. So looping can be used for both things. It's a very common Hollywood practice, but sometimes actors are not a big fan of doing it because it brings a level of dishonesty to the performance, and as you're going to hear, Scott Glenn is one of those. Another thing I wanted to make you guys aware of, at one point, you're going to hear a cassette tape recorder on the table reach the end of its side, and then the play and record buttons are going to pop up loudly. If you guys are like 40 years old or younger, this will probably be the first time in your life you've ever heard this sound. So I figured I had to point it out. Scott does refer to it. He stops his answer right in the middle and says something like, I don't know if somebody wants to change that. And then you'll hear another mystery sound, which is somebody flipping the tape over and then hitting play and record to start taping on the other side. Then later on, you're going to hear what we lovingly refer to on this show as a beep edit, where we hear a beep in the recording and suddenly jump forward in time about 15 seconds because the exact same thing just happened to us. You know, our tape stopped. This is just one of the many ways that interviews on these shows are a product of a long-gone era. Nowadays, everything is recorded digitally, and this sort of thing just doesn't happen anymore. Last thing, I have a language warning. He does use the F word at one point, and that's actually today's secret word. So when you hear it, wherever you are, everybody scream as loud as you can.
Very good. I'm about to cough, so I don't want to screw up the audio. I wanted to laugh, but I'm about to cough. Before I cough, let's get into Scott Glenn from The Silence of the Lambs.
And I will look forward to your cough, which I will hear privately.
Yes.
Scott, could you talk a little bit about the way your character Crawford treated the Jodie Foster character, like being a woman? He trusted her, but at the same time, you know, didn't share things with her.
The Crawford character, the fact that she was a woman had nothing to do with the way he treated her. The fact that she was a student at Quantico had everything to do with the way that he treated her. Yeah, to some extent, a Machiavellian sort of move. I just played him like a person who really couldn't tell the whole truth to the person that he's dealing with. You know, that he needed information and needed her to help him get that information. And then in the course of their relationship, sees in her the same skills that he has in himself. And I think that what really draws Crawford to Clarice, aside from whatever attraction was there, is the fact that he sees himself in her. And he sees someone, probably the first time in his life, that has the same kinds of instinctual skills as he does. And he realizes that it's almost like he can pass the baton to her at the end. She can become him. I think it's the idea that, a teacher's always looking for a student that can wind up being, better than the master. I mean, that's always the object, I think. And I think what Crawford sees in Clarice is someone who has the same kind of strange abilities to crawl into the mind and soul of this kind of a criminal and get them.
Was this a role you campaigned for?
No.
How did it come to you?
Originally, the part was written closer to the book, and the actor that they wanted to do it was older, and I was doing another film, and 3 weeks before I was going to start shooting it, Jonathan called me up, and Jonathan has been friends of me and my wife and my family for 19 years, so it's not just, our relationship goes back way, way, way. So he called me up and said, I'd like you to do this part. And I read the script, and I said, no. And he said, I really would. And I said, I've got another movie, and they'll probably sue me if I leave it. And he said, no, Ryan can work it out. So I flew to New York and had dinner with him, and then at the end of the dinner, we decided to, play together again.
What were the odds that you were reluctant to do the script? You didn't like the part? You thought you were too young?
I didn't know who the guy was. I had no sense of who the guy was. And I asked Jonathan, and rather than tell me, he said, I could set up a meeting with you and a man named John Douglas at Quantico, and you can spend, a week, several days with him, and that will answer your question a lot more than I could. So I did that. I went down to Quantico, and I spent some time with John, who runs the FBI's behavioral science unit, and was fascinated and also horrified by the whole world that those people live in, and decided to do it. But the decision was based on that, and the fact that Jonathan was doing the movie, and we're just good friends, and I love the work that he does, and we hadn't done anything together for a long, long time. We'd done 2 Roger Corman films both at the beginning of our careers, so that was basically what decided me on. No, the mainly was, how do I get out of this other thing that they're going to kill me? And that was a little difficult. It actually was quite difficult to engineer, but we managed to do it.
Did you go back to it?
No, I just didn't do it. Someone else did.
Did you have a preconceived notion of what an FBI person was, and when you went down there, how did it change? When you spent time with them?
I didn't have a preconceived notion of what an FBI agent was. I had a preconceived notion of what a policeman was.
Mm-hmm. Which was?
Given my experience with police, which was growing up, I've known a number of policemen in my life.
And what was that notion, that they were kind of hard and?
My notion was that they were products of their environment, naturally so, like we all are. And therefore, I expected to run into people that had certain biases that in point of fact, these people didn't. But that's not to say that other FBI agents don't, I don't know. Behavioral science is an unusual bunch of policemen in that they're a one-crime outfit. All they deal with is sexual homicide. That's all they deal with. So John Douglas for 12 years has done nothing but crawl into the minds of sexual killers to, hopefully catch and eventually prosecute them. And what that does to, in terms of cops working in that outfit is that they don't have the normal biases that, say, a street cop would have, because sexual homicide has absolutely no socioeconomic connection at all. There are as many rich, well-to-do ones as there are poor ones, it's a completely, it's 100% male crime. No, there never has been such a thing as a female serial killer. That they don't exist. It's not to say that there aren't women who kill multiple times, but they do it either for revenge or hate or for profit, not to get an orgasm. And it's also a crime that's done, in the high 90 percentiles by white males. So it's a big problem in Europe. It's a big problem in the Soviet Union. The one thing that all sexual killers seem to have in common, at least everyone that John Douglas ever dealt with, is that they were all, without exception, abused kids, and isolated and abused at an early age. So you don't get a lot of the kind of attitudes that, I remember I was talking to one FBI agent. I won't say who it is because I don't want to get him in trouble, but I was asking him, I was asking him about his. You would assume that most policemen are, say, would be in favor of, say, right to life. So I asked this one guy, I said, how many of these guys would never have been born had their mothers had the option of an abortion? And he said probably at least a third of them, if not more. And they were unwanted kids to begin with. So that's a very unusual attitude to come from a cop. They're the products of their environment, and that's what they see all the time. So that was interesting too. I also didn't realize the degree of education that they had. John is a PhD. Of the 10 or 11 agents under him, I think 6 have master's degrees. You could check this because I'm not sure what the numbers are, but they're educated, bright people who are interested in constantly expanding their education. But that seems to happen to me a lot. When I did Hunt for Red October, I had a whole preconceived idea of what an American sub captain was, and then I took a ride on a fast attack sub with a skipper named Tom Fargo, and by the end of that 3 or 4 days, the part had changed entirely. So that happens a lot.
Can you talk about the part that you finished or you're doing now in Backdraft? What kind of role do you have for that?
Yeah, I play a Chicago fireman in Engine Company 17, which is the most active engine company in the United States, the Chicago Fire Department. And I'm one of a group of guys in the engine company. Sort of a Dutch uncle to Billy Baldwin and a good friend to Kurt Russell, who the two of them played brothers.
What type of man is he?
He's if I could use a military parallel, he's like a master sergeant, like a guy who's never interested in being he's the pipe man. That's the guy who actually is on the end of the hose, who turns it on, goes in and puts out fires. And, an urban, in a way, an urban cowboy, crazy, irreverent. It's a film that involves, as well as action and romance, a bit of mystery. So I don't really want to talk too much specifically about, but that's the character that I play.
You have often played characters that are very physical.
Mm-hmm.
And while in Silence of the Lambs you're more intellectual, how differently did you have to?
Well, it's fun not having to wake up in the morning and stretch for 2 hours before I went to work, or to say, how many rounds did I fire out of this rifle, that was fun. But the preparation basically is always the same. It's emotional, trying to just connect your own life with the character you're playing, seeing where those two things dovetail, and when they don't, figuring out some way to make them do it.
With that in mind, you keep talking about the character. What was your reaction the first time you looked in the mirror when you looked so much older?
I thought, wow, boy, that's a pretty dorky looking dude. I'm not, suits and ties and all of that stuff I'm not real comfortable with that. I liked it. I like looking different. I like the chameleon aspect. I'd like to, that sort of that physical trapping, window dressing kind of stuff. It's fun to change all the time. It's just. I think the only thing would ever really bother me would be if I, and it has happened to me in the past, if I looked in the mirror and said, God, I look just like I did in the last movie.
When you take a role like your one in My Heroes Have Always Been Cowboys,
yeah,
going in that's not a big budget picture that's going to be up there with
right.
Home Alone or whatever.
Right.
What makes you take the risk and you're going to spend the same amount of time doing that as you would, A Hunt for Red October or whatever, or this, a meaner stream film?
It's always different. With that film, I love the idea. One of my favorite books, and it was an incomplete book by James Agee, incomplete because he died before he finished it, was Death in the Family. And what I loved about that book was it was a book about an incident that every single person, every single one of us in this room, sooner or later deals with. It's truly universal. And My Heroes Have Always Been Cowboys, I thought, dealt with some questions that are, it's not about, finding the killer or sinking the sub, or it's about basically when someone close to you, a member of your family, your mother, your father, or whatever, gets old and incapacitated and unable to take care of themselves, do you put them in an old age home, or do you bite the bullet and take care of them yourself? Do you move them in with you? And it's an uncomfortable question, but it's one that everybody sooner or later has to look that one in the face, and that fascinated me, to be able to deal with that kind of very rarely do films or plays deal with things that are that truly close to the bone, and so I wanted to do it for that reason, and then the idea of working with Ben Johnson turned me on, because I think he's a terrific actor, and it was, I don't know, it just felt like a good way to spend the summer.
Yeah, it's a nice little film. I just don't honestly know who's going to see it other than probably the people in this room.
Well, I never think about that when I make a movie. I never think about, is this going to have a big audience, or, I let my agents and people like that, concern themselves with those kind of things. So basically, I look at the part and I say, do I feel like spending 3 or 4 months walking in this guy's shoes? Is that going to be interesting to me? And that's number one. Number two, who's the director? Is he going to paint a good picture with the colors I put on his palette? And number three, how much money am I going to make?
Speaking of directors, could you describe your relationship with Jonathan Demme over the years? Is it easier or more difficult working with a friend? How did you help get into the role of Jack Crawford?
It's easier because we know each other, and the way he helped me get into the role of Jack Crawford was, as I said, first setting up meetings with John Douglas and making it easy for me to fit into that environment. Aside from that, I just like Jonathan a lot. We laugh, and we've got similar musical tastes, and and Carol and Joanne know each other. They're both his wife is an artist, my wife is an artist as well. We know each other's kids. It's just Jonathan and I don't have to read between the lines when we talk to each other.
You develop sort of shorthand?
Yeah, absolutely. And we, for quite a while we were trying to think of something to do together. And when I did Burn This in New York, I remember the second or third night after I opened it, he came backstage after he saw it and said, God, man, we haven't done anything for years. I mean, we've talked to each other, friends, but we ought to do something. And I said, yeah, sure. Well, if something comes up, let me know. And then this did come up, so we did it. And that was fun.
Also, you've known him professionally and personally for 20 years. How do you see his career at this point, and how this movie fits into his career as a director?
I mean, Jonathan could really give you the true answer to that, because I'm really trying to second guess him. But from my vantage point, Jonathan's films have become more and more a personal expression, and this film, I think, fits in a funny way. It's just beginning to sort of round out and fill in colors Jonathan's work as a director that haven't really been there before, simply because most of Jonathan's films have had a comedic slant to them, so that the funny angle, the laugh came first, and then the revelation of whatever was underneath that, which was very often serious, came afterwards, like in Married to the Mob. With this film, there's absolutely no attempt at going for laughs at all. I mean, there are a few little things that are sort of amusing, and every now and then an audience in an uncomfortable way will giggle at something the Lecter says or something that happens. But the point of view of the film is never comedic; it's dead serious, and it's in a lot of ways. I saw it for the first time last night. It's a chase film, and I think it's, in terms of things like pacing, to pull you out on the edge of your seat. He's done a beautiful job. It's the first time he's done this kind of a film, so I don't know where it's going to lead to next, and what's going to happen next.
Did you see it with an audience last night?
Yeah.
How did they react?
Some of you may have been there.
Were the audience?
Oh, were you there at the same time?
Yeah. So how'd you react?
Into the seat.
Scott, you've been working a lot lately.
Yeah.
Too, but I wonder if you still live in Santa Fe, and what kind of activities do you have time to do?
No, I never lived in Santa Fe.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I used to have a manager who lived in Santa Fe. I live in Ketchum, Idaho.
Oh.
Even more remote.
But you live someplace in the country.
Yeah.
With, physical activities,
Mhm.
or something.
Yeah.
Your daughter, your children.
Yeah.
So what kind of lifestyle do you have? I mean, when you don't work.
When I don't. Yeah. Well, I've been working a lot more lately now that my kids are grown up. There was a period of time in my life when I kind of took the phone off the hook every winter because I wanted to be there for homework and all that kind of shit. Just to to not miss out on their growing up. Because now my daughters are 20 and 17, and that's it. They're women. They're not little kids anymore. These things are turning off. So I don't know if any of you want to check them out. Aside from that, it changes. Like, I don't know. For the last couple weeks, Carol and I have been working on. We finished a celebrity ski tournament to raise money for a cause that we care a lot about, which is Mokomazi. It's a game reserve in Tanzania that's the only place in Africa, if not the world now, where they're repatriating animals that are on the edge of extinction and saving them. And it exists completely on donations. So that's what we've been doing. That's what I've been doing the last few weeks. Aside from that, I'm just playing, skiing and climbing and living my life. Going down to Mexico. We live there, and we have a little place down in Mexico. Yeah, down in Baja. But I haven't been home very much. Backdraft was over 5 months of shooting.
Did you really enjoy Banff?
I loved it. I loved it. Yeah, especially Lake Louise. I mean, they got 7.5 feet of snow there, and the head of the ski school took us out of bounds into powder like that. It was great.
Did you spend much time other than the ski weekend in the area?
No, we had to get back because there was. Were you up there?
Yeah, I'm from Calgary.
Well, you know that the night that they had the auction to raise money for those people, I had to get back home to make sure that some of that money that was promised was real, rather than just somebody raising their hand to, look good. So I didn't stay up there, but we're going to go back. Carol and I will go back in the spring when there's corn snow all over the place, and ski our asses off.
Does music play a strong role in your life? What type of music do you like?
Rock and roll, blues. Jonathan has turned me on to Haitian music, and there's so many different kinds of music that I love. I'm not a big fan of Lawrence Welk, but if there's one kind of music that I really love, it's the blues, and that's why I had such a great time in Chicago. I'd never spent time in that city before, and I was like, are there any New Yorkers here? second prize, man. and I never thought that before. But, woof. I mean, the music in that town is unbelievable. Unbelievable. I could spend every night at Buddy Guy's Legends.
Growing up, did you ever have aspirations to be a music star, or was it always acting?
It was neither. I wanted to be a writer, a poet. My whole sort of romantic idea was, I would be a kind of a soldier of fortune and write a great epic poem about it. By the time I was 32, 33 years old, probably die.
Are you still writing?
Yeah. My great hero growing up was Lord Byron, and I had this fixation on being that kind of a character for a long time. That's what got me into acting, actually. I'd been working on a newspaper in Wisconsin, and I quit that job, and I got another job on a sports desk in the Virgin Islands. But the job wasn't starting for 6 months. So a girl that I knew called me up, and she said, you can write description really well, but you've always had a hard time writing dialogue. Why don't you go to New York and take an acting class, because it'll kick you in your ass as far as dialogue. You'll have to deal with it, and it'll make you a better writer. So I always put up or shut up propositions always make sense to me, always. So I did it. I went to New York and got a job as a bricklayer and started taking acting classes with Bill Hickey. And it was like a light went off in my head, and I thought, Jesus, I'm an actor. And I never went to the Virgin Islands. I stayed in New York. And now I'm here in this room.
Could we talk a little bit about the technique of looping when you loop films and stuff? Have you ever been in a situation where a loop that you did actually enhanced your performance or took away from your performance? Or
enhanced, sure. Yeah, there have been times when looping films have really enhanced performance. And there have also been times when I wouldn't say that looping took away from the performance, but a lot of times I'll go through the experiences of listening to it, and I'll say, well, what's wrong with that? I can never get that again. And they'll say, yeah, but can't you hear that little whistle in the background? I say, well, fuck the whistle. I don't care about that. I can't. So you get into those kind of situations where sometimes it feels to me like the technology, the cleanness of the technology can get in the way of the immediacy of the performance. But I love John Cassavetes' old movies, so I'm probably not a good person to talk to about that. I don't mind out of focus. I don't mind blurry soundtracks. I would give up almost anything for spontaneity. But that's just my taste.
Your bio for this film says you've done a movie called Homegrown.
My heroes have always been cowboys. It's the same one. Yeah, they changed the title.
Do you have another movie?
That and Backdraft, which I haven't looped yet. And there's going to be a lot of looping on that.
Why?
Well, because we're in huge. Well, I think there are 5 major fires in the film, and when fires are burning, the sound of the fire alone will mess up the track enough to have to loop it.
You're spending a lot of time in looping.
I will, either here or New York, depending on where they do it.
Do you have any scenes with Robert De Niro in that film?
Not really. There's a scene that we're all involved in, but nothing. We don't specifically deal with each other. No.
You get to hang out with them or get to know them.
No. In Backdraft, my world pretty much is encompassed by the people who are in Engine Company 17. Basically, Kurt Russell, Billy Baldwin, a bunch of other actors that.
Can you talk about working with Jodie Foster? I don't remember if you mentioned.
If it wasn't for Jonathan and Tack, and Jodie and Anthony, and not only that, the whole crew and the whole sort of family that Jonathan puts together, which is phenomenal. I mean, he's a really special guy to work with, and you can ask anyone who's worked with him, and you'll get the same answer. That was what made it palatable. And there are other directors, and I won't say who they are, that would have been a monstrous experience living in that kind of darkness day after day But Jonathan is a kind of very funny, light, irreverent guy, and you really need to be that. The people at the FBI in behavioral science, I mean, if you hung out with them for 3 or 4 days, people would be shocked at some of the stuff that they say and some of their, what seems to be, you'll get an FBI agent will stand up and talk to another bunch of FBI agents and say the most, unbelievable things about about the cases that they're working on, and you realize they have to. It's a way of maintaining distance. You can't really live with complete emotional connections in that world, or you'd have a nervous breakdown in a week. So it's...
Are you still writing poetry?
Mm-hmm.
You have any plans on publishing any of it?
Boy, not the stuff I've been writing.
Why?
I have it's funny, as an actor, I think I'm pretty good. And I can see a performance and think, well, if I had to do it all over again, I could do this, I could do this, I could do this, but as it stands, I don't feel bad about it. I have never been able to do that with writing. It's like, it seems like whatever I'm reading at the time, I compare with what I'm writing at the time, and my writing just never makes it. It always suffers in comparison, So like lately I've been reading Cormac McCarthy's stuff, and which is incredible. And before that I was into like a Faulkner phase. Well, if you want to compare yourself to those people, it's those are tough yardsticks to measure up to. So I basically just do it because it's just a voice that I need to exercise, and I can do it privately and on a piece of paper. But I haven't really thought about it. Years ago I published some stuff, but I don't know. Eventually, I suppose if I really feel good about a body of work, I'll give it a shot.
How important is it to you staying out?
Time for one more.
How important is it for you personally to staying out of the limelight? You live in a remote part of the country. How important is that to you?
I guess I've always been the kind of person that has made a really strong effort to be able to have my cake and eat it too. And the idea of giving up privacy isn't really very appealing to me at all, and I think that ultimately it's injurious to any artist, because what we all do is steal from people. And if you get to be well known, whether it's as a painter or an actor or a writer or anything, but if notoriety really starts to happen to you, people don't behave the same way around you. You really can't observe the human condition the way that you can if you're just... if you walk into, say, Howard Johnson's out in the highway and order a cup of coffee, and you want to watch waitresses and truck drivers talking to each other, and they all know who you are, they'll start doing their numbers for you. So to some extent, it's really important. But but as I say, it's a double-edged sword. I do the most public thing in the world, and to expect that people aren't going to some extent react to that is naive too. But I, as much as I possibly can, I like not being recognized.
Thank you.
Well, folks, we are back from our interview with Scott Glenn.
You missed one hell of a cough, guys.
Oh, that was a very good cough.
I'm sorry you missed it. It was something to behold.
Matt, thank you, Matt. Matt, do you have any postscripts on Mr. Glenn?
I have one. They talked quite a bit about Scott's writing, and he said he wasn't sure whether he would ever publish any of it. To date, he has not. I did find something on Amazon written by someone named Dr. Scott Glenn. It's a book called Heroes from Heaven, Battleground Earth, Good versus Evil. A subject so complex it took 3 titles to cover it. But it was not written by our Scott Glenn. It was penned by someone who was wearing his face Hannibal Lecter style.
Oh, wow, that is funny. So Jodie Foster's up next.
She is. And Greg Word, the biomaster, take it away, man.
Jodie Foster, she started off as a kid. She started off as a kid.
As opposed to any other actor we have on this show.
Or human being. She started off as a kid in the business. She was a child actor, as one would say.
Yes.
I think a lot of people my age and Matt's age, Generation X people remember her as, the copper tone girl. Remember?
I don't remember that so much.
She started the TV series The Magical World of Disney, a couple of episodes of that back in 1970.
The Wonderful World of Disney was just an umbrella show that they would show movies. So, do you know what the movies were?
The Magical World of Disney ones were, actually it's a 2-parter. It's called Menace on the Mountain.
Huh.
Yeah. So, but also she was in a show I used to love as a kid, the courtship of Eddie's father. She was in that for about 5 episodes. She played this character named Joey Kelly. You know, My Three Sons in 1971, 72.
I do know your 3 sons. I've met them many times.
The Partridge Family, Tom Sawyer. All of this, there's so many. She dabbled in television.
She was a successful working actress as a child.
Right, as a child. But it wasn't until 3 films that were released in 1976: The Little Girl Who Lives Down the Lane, Bugsy Malone, which was, I'm sure you remember, Matt, as a kid watching it.
I remember that one, yeah.
Also Freaky Friday. So I mean, these 3 films helped establish her as a kid actress, you know. And then as she actually grew up, you know, you remember her in The Hotel New Hampshire, based on that John Irving novel, and she gave one of my favorite performances when she was younger in this film called Five Corners, which was released in 1987. You know, but it wasn't until actually, I loved her in Stealing Home, co-starring Mark Harmon, but it wasn't until she won the Oscar for her work in 1988's The Accused, when Jodie Foster became, in my opinion, an A-list go-to star. And it was thanks to The Accused.
For the second time, because she was kind of A-list as a child.
Right.
But then she was kind of just a working actress, not so A-list, but then she became that again.
Yes, exactly. And then, so 1988, it was The Accused. 3 years later, in 91, she had her most iconic role as Clarice Starling in The Silence of the Lambs. So right here, we're catching, I guess, Jodie Foster. Is she at her peak? She's like right reaching the peak.
Well, I would say that The Silence of the Lambs was probably the peak for most of the people involved in it. It was just such a huge touchstone film.
Right. And, you know, there's a litany of just great stuff that Jodie Foster did post The Silence of the Lambs, like Panic Room. And, I mean, I kind of like that, and The King, which was released in 1999. I mean, but lately she's been really focusing, even though she was in the 2018 film Hotel Artemis, she's been focusing most of her career as a director.
Yes.
And, you know, back in 91, it's so interesting, is even though it was way back in 1991, this interview covers her love for another film that was coming out later that year, Little Man Tate. That would be her
which was her directorial debut.
Yeah, her feature directing debut. So you get a little bit of a taste of, though she is a working actress, that this directing career was a big part of her life then, and it's an even bigger part of her life now. I mean, most recently she directed a Black Mirror episode. She directed the 2016 film Money Monster, all this stuff. So she's had quite the illustrious career.
Do you know what she loves doing even more than directing?
Being a mom.
Looping.
That's funny.
And thank God Gail Murphy was there to find that out for us.
In 91, with Silence of the Lambs and Little Man Tate, she actually received the Spencer Tracy Award at UCLA, an event which I attended I was interning at the UCLA Daily Bruin, and I remember.
Wow. So you weren't even a professional Hollywood guy yet?
No, I was actually a film writer guy for the Daily Bruin, and I remember sitting in the audience and seeing Jodie Foster in person. I'm talking about a movie I really loved, and then she talks about, I remember her accepting the award and doing a little Q&A, talking about her film influences, and I go, you know what? Seeing Jodie Foster in person is awesome, and I love working for the Daily Bruin. I want to do this for the rest of my life. And it was that moment it was just crystallized in my head that this is what I want to do, is actually interview actors and filmmakers and write about them and figure out how to make that a career. And 28 years later, I really regret that decision. I regret the decision.
I was going to say, here you are doing a podcast that nobody listens to.
Yes, eating Subway cookies, horrible. Actually, it's Carl's Jr. Cookies. But anyways, that's my little aside, Matt. Matt,
right. Plus your little sponsorship plug.
Yeah, Carl's Jr. Very good stuff. Try the Beyond Burger. Okay, so go ahead, Matt. What were you saying?
No, I got nothing.
Well, Matt, he's going to have a lot more PSs after the Jodie Foster interview is done, but without further ado,
don't tell me what to do.
I will not. Without further ado, and I will never tell Matt what to do. Here is Jodie Foster playing Clarice Starling. Actually, she's Jodie Foster playing Jodie Foster in The Silence of the Lambs.
I don't know what that means.
Neither do I. Here we go.
Just let us know.
Okay. Ah, you got your t-shirt on now. Great.
Yeah, that's great.
These are new ones, and we didn't have these when we were shooting. We had an entirely different version there, but these are very cool.
Why don't you just
Oh, I'm sorry. Am I too loud? Are you listening to me over there? No.
tell us which questions you haven't been asked yet?
I don't know. a funny thing that, is sometimes people always say, like, you're so, oh, it's see what I mean? People always say, you're so serious. I'm like, well, somebody asks you like a sort of serious question, I guess I'm not going to like go into my Mickey Rooney routine.
Jodie, could you explain, outline for us the many subtle and blatant way that this character is doesn't get respect or is treated differently because she's a woman?
Well, it's definitely, it's a part of the plot, basically, that she is part of a minority in some ways, and that's specifically the area which she's coming from, as well as her, her roommate at Quantico, who's also, a black woman. That this is the new generation, a generation of prehistorically outcast segment, certainly under the Hoover years, but that this is the new side of the FBI in some ways, maybe the more human face, and that yes, she has to combat all sorts of problems of not being allowed her dignity in some ways, and not being allowed a central voice.
Which was more grueling, the accused or this film to shoot?
Grueling. Well, I tell you, this was a hard shoot because it was winter, it was really cold, and I was pretty much worked a lot, but we had these 5-day weeks, and Jonathan's sets are just really even, and they're just really nice, and they have just like normal like family things, and Jonathan's birthday they had they decorated the whole place with like Caribbean everything, and somebody made curried lamb and stuff, and everybody from the movie came, and there were balloons, and there was like kids everywhere. So no matter what it may look like on screen, I mean, it certainly wasn't tense like that when we were shooting. The Accused was a different story. We had a lot less money, and it was a little bit more, I think, dramatically a little more intense, certainly for me, and it was just a different groove.
What was it like shooting in Vancouver?
I loved it. It was great. It was a wonderful, really very human city. Really nice. I love smaller cities. I mean, I really like the sort of, the Boston kind of Seattle, Vancouver thing a lot.
What was the attraction when you picked up the script, or someone called you and said, I have the script? What was the one
for this?
That you connected with? That...
Actually, I'd a couple of writers called me up and said, you got to read this book. You'd be perfect for this part. So I read that, and then I kind of pursued it. So it wasn't really a question of somebody handing me the script and me going, well, I mean, I knew about it from day one, from the time that Ted Talley started writing it. So I had followed its inception. And something that not necessarily the character that I wanted to play, but it was specifically the story that I wanted to be in. And that seems to be the way I choose my movies. I never really think about, sometimes I do, but very rarely do I ever say like, oh, this character's great. Usually it's the story's wonderful and it goes from here to there, and then I worry about the character later. And a lot of times, when you're trying to look for scripts, certainly for female roles, if you waited around for like the perfect humanly etched female role, you'll like grow old before everyone's eyes because they just don't exist. So it means you got to find a good story and then create a human character from there. I think usually. Not in this one though. This is a great one.
Since you won the Oscar, have you noticed a different kind of script coming to you, or better scripts coming to you, or how is it?
Well, I don't even know. I'm not really very aware of what comes to me and what doesn't, because I kind of read everything that's out there. So it's people are nicer to me. I go into a store and they kind of like run, say, "Can I help you with anything?" Whereas I used to have to wait a little bit longer. But that's about it. No, I don't know. I don't know. It's definitely in terms of business, it was a good thing, and it is a function of this industry, and something that makes the industry roll and makes certain people make money, and decides certain turns, and it's part of the business process of this industry.
Does it make you feel more responsible as to the roles you choose now that you are the Oscar-winning actress? Does that?
It makes me feel more watched. That's definitely true. I mean, I can't.
That goes part and parcel with it.
Certain, yeah.
You want to give people something good to watch.
Right. Well, yeah, it makes me not want to be bad. This is true. Because people will point at me and go, ooh. So, I guess that's true. I don't feel that I don't feel the pressure as much. Maybe because I've been sheltered from it. Maybe I should feel the pressure a little bit more. But for some reason, I've always felt that up until now, the way that my career has done well was that I always chose movies that I thought were good. And I always made choices because I thought they were the right choices. And I sort of refuse. I'd rather make my own mistakes than make someone else's. So I'd really rather follow my own instincts, and that seems to have always paid off. So why change that now? You know.
There's a group called, I don't even know if they're still active, Women Against Violence Against Women, and they protest violence against women on the screen. Did you have any second thoughts when you read the script about that?
Certainly not. Certainly not. Violence is a part of female life and male life in this culture. To not talk about it, to deny that it exists, is not to do anything about it. I mean, you have to, if you're going to face a dramatic issue, then face it head on, and take the risks and create, you know, something that is a piece of information that people can take progressively. Now, this also is good entertainment. I know I don't have any trouble with that. It is good entertainment, but I also think that it's entirely defendable, and it's probably the first time you'll ever see a female hero that is at once very specifically female, and is not, you know, sort of Rambette, you know, some sort of steroid version of a guy, and who uses all of those female things, I mean, specifically, you know, intuition and perspicacity and all that kind of stuff, and a negative history in some ways, all of that, but that's somebody who's really a role model, you know, and you can really look up to, and it's not just like a girl running around in her underwear, like, you know, killing the villain or something. I mean, it's absolutely progressive, I think.
What did you figure out by doing this movie? More of the inner workings of the criminal mind, especially in the case of sexual killers.
First of all, sexual killers.
Well, that's a movie's about sexual killers.
Not really, and that's a really tricky. That's a tricky. It's just a tricky phrase, and I'd look into that
The phrase was used by Scott Glenn as being what John Douglas is an expert on.
Yes, on what's called sexual patterns and.
He says sexual homicide.
Yeah, John Douglas is an expert on that, but I mean, I'm just saying, like, I can't use that phrase because I'm not the expert in it. It's very loosely used, and it's not a good.
What is that? And he said that it's typically a white male problem. It's not a female.
Right, absolutely not a female problem. There are actually there's this new case.
What did you learn about that?
A lot. You know, read all the books, and it's fascinating, and the stuff it's absolutely fascinating literature, and it's. I encourage anyone to go out and find out about it.
Do you yourself like thrillers as a genre, books and films? Do you enjoy being scared to the edge of your seat, you know, with this kind of...
I like them. I'm not, I like real dramatic films that take me someplace, and someplace that I'd never thought of, that make me question things. And I think this movie does that as well. So, you know, I'm twice as happy, because I got my thriller and I got the other thing too.
What does it make you question?
Well, it's very easy for people to shunt someone aside and say, this person is an animal, this person is not human, this could never be me. And that's one of the things that I think most of my work has gotten involved in, is always trying to reveal that no behavior is not human. It's just different than you, and understanding it is the first way of changing it.
We got to see a lot of sides of Clarissa, certainly when they were playing the game, No Pro Quid, and also getting to see her with her boss. What sort of challenge was it for you you're so viewed as a strong woman in your own life? What was it sort of a challenge playing Clarissa, who was so vulnerable and yet so strong in her own life as well?
I don't know. I love those scenes. I mean, it was. If they were a play, I'd still be doing it. You know, it's they're really great, and so much of it is so subtextual about a certain kind of intimacy that they had based on that subtextual need that they had for each other.
On the screen, you're more or less a fearless woman. You know, I just want to know.
I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's true. I mean, the one thing that I really like about Clarice, which you were hitting on, is that she's a combination of astute intellect, structure, but who also relies on emotion and instinct, and who is vulnerable. And in some ways, her strength is that she allows herself to be. She's starting to allow herself to be vulnerable, and that's something that I firmly believe in. I mean, I do believe in the head and the heart, and that. You know, and a lot of my work is about this. It's about trying to reconcile those two things. That in some ways, you know, our culture likes to tear apart and put in opposite camps and say they can't exist together. And I think that, you know, the great Amazon fearless, perfect person is the one that can reintegrate both of those things in a very human and very generous way.
maybe that was the wrong definition, a woman which is not easy to scare. I just wanted to know what maybe scares you in private life.
Oh, I think she's scared to death.
She's scared.
Clarissa's scared to
death. I would just have stopped, I would just have, going home.
Oh, absolutely. She's, she is compelled to take her fears right there and to come to terms with them. It doesn't mean she's not scared, and it doesn't mean she doesn't have them. It just means that she's compelled to look deeper into them. And that ultimately that's the way that she'll get what she wants, which is to pursue her lot as the hero. I mean, it's about the making of a hero in some ways. And you get a small glimpse at the making of a villain, which is to make the making of a quote-unquote evil in our society, of the influences and patterns that brought him there. And then you get to see the making of the hero, and the influences, patterns, and pains that brought her there. And it's a funny thing. I mean, that both of them, it's really about what make both of them be who they are, and her specifically the hero.
Isn't it kind of making of an everyday hero that by the time your character is developed, it'll be kind of like Scott Glenn's character, where he just goes about his job, and he's doing something that most people couldn't do, couldn't handle, wouldn't want to handle, even if they could. And that this is going to become a daily thing for him. It's heroic initially, but eventually it's a job.
Absolutely, and it's I think that's certainly true with my life in some weird way. I mean, I feel that way with my work. I mean, I'm not sitting out there going, I'm saving the world every time I make a movie, and I certainly am not saving the world every time I make a movie. But I know that there are certain things that I choose that move me for very specific reasons, and I know that they're all about my personal progression. They're things that I need to know about myself, or things that I want to pass on as a role model to other people, and those things, are personal and public. I mean, they're for my next generation, but they're also just for me too.
Could you discuss the transition from acting to directing your latest project?
It was great. It was a wonderful experience, and I don't think it's a transition. I think it's a continuation in some weird way. I mean, I'm a filmmaker, and every technician on a movie set is a filmmaker. So it's funny, people say, well, are you going to choose to do this, or just do that, or just do this? I mean, it seems to me like it's all the same thing in some weird way. Where you are making a film, and if I was a prop person, I am making a film too. So it's all part of that same big chunk thing,
Why did you choose this particular project?
Because I loved it. I found it and I loved it, and it's hard to believe that I could ever love a project as much as this. It's like a first love thing. I love this film, and I continue to. It just amazes me. It's like 2.5 years, 3 years have gone by, and I'm just as crazy about it as I ever was. And who would have thunk it? It's like, who could have thought you could ever be committed to anything for that long a time?
What it is about and what your character is in Little Men Take?
Well, I don't want to talk about it too much because it's not going to come out till September, and then you're going to get bored of it. But basically, it's about a child prodigy, a young boy who is not only a genius in math and science and all those things, but is gifted with a kind of Renaissance sensitivity. He is the man we wish would be born, in some ways, and he's influenced by these two women. One who's his mother, cool, frank, young mother, and a child psychologist, academic, played by Diane Wiest.
You are the mother?
Yes.
Did you pay extra attention to what Jonathan was doing, directing this film, knowing that the next film you were going to be directing?
Yeah, I suppose not any more than I would with anybody else, really. I mean, the thing that I did learn from Jonathan, and I loved working with him, is his patience. And at first I was, he just loves people, and he's not humoring people. He just doesn't know how to not be generous, and he doesn't know how to not be a listener, and how to not be patient, and all of that. And that's really something that I learned from him, because I know that I'm a little, I tend to be a little tougher on people, I think. And he's more open in some weird way. And I think I learned a little bit about that from him.
Thomas Harris is writing another book using these characters. If they make it into a film, will you play Clarissa?
Gee, I don't know.
The reason why I asked that is because you said if this was a play, you'd still be doing it.
Oh yeah, I love this character. I mean, I could play this character for the rest of my life. I totally love this character, and ultimately completely understand her. I don't know, I don't know. It's like another project, another movie.
But you would be tempted, yeah.
I don't even know. I don't really know.
How do you look back on your older films, Freaky Friday, and all the ones that I grew up with? I'm not too much younger than you.
That's how we grew up together.
I watched that film. I thought it was hysterical at the time, and I've watched you do all the different films. How do you look back on your library?
I don't know. I've always liked I liked my movies, and I chose them for very personal reasons. I really liked them, and I still see the spark in them that I saw when I first got on the film. You know, there's some things that were well done, and some things that were not so well conceived. You know, but I still feel like I still see what I saw in them then, and it is funny to see myself growing up on screen. I mean, every once in a while I'll look at TV and go like, oh wow, and, you know, I had a big nose at a certain point. You know, you get that way when you're 13 or something, and you look sort of awkward and I don't know. It's funny.
Do you watch your old films, or only if they're on, or?
Yeah, if they're on or something, or I don't actually have all my video cassettes, but you know, yeah.
Do you think your career would have been different if your mother hadn't been guiding it?
Yeah, well, who would have been? You know, yeah, sure. Boy, if I'd have been all by myself when I was 5, I would have been in trouble. I wouldn't know. I'd be walking the streets or something. I don't know. Yes, she definitely had a big influence on me, and it continues to. I mean, on my tastes and on my integrity, I think, you know. And she was a movie lover. You know, she took me to foreign films from the time I was a little kid, and she really believed that she wanted me to have an integrity career, and I was either going to have be a serious and fine actress, or you know, or why bother, you know. And I get that. She gave me a really great work ethic about also how to be realistic about the business as well, and not like the you know, I want to be alone kind of thing. You know, to take it for what it is as well, and to know that it's a business like anything else.
How did she know all that?
I don't know. She was pretty wise, I guess. I mean, she had dealings with the film industry, I guess, a little bit. I know she's just a very intelligent and generous soul, I think.
At this stage in your career, Jodie, are you more at peace with being famous and all that goes with that than before? I mean, you seem very comfortable with...
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've never not been at peace with it particularly. I mean, you know, it's just reality. It's like what it is, I guess. I don't feel like... I'm not very recognizable, frankly. I mean, I'm not that recognizable. I'm like Michael Jackson or something, you know. It's not really an issue in my life. And I've created a world, and you know, certainly with the help of my mom when I was younger, and then extended when I got older. I created a world for myself where I didn't feel like a freak, and I guess that means that I don't go to every Tom, Dick, and Harry event, and I don't go to, you know, Spagos and go, oh, could they dare photograph me? You know, I just don't go. If I don't want to get photographed, then I just don't go, you know. Or, you know, I've created an environment for myself with my 6 friends, who've been my 6 friends for the last 10 years, and haven't gone to college. And, you know, I have a place in France, too, so it's like another place that I go to. Or it created a kind of normalcy for myself, which might very well be an illusion, but it's a way that makes me feel secure, and that makes me, you know, not get away with so much, I guess, or not have, I don't know, not to live in some kind of big fantasy or something.
But being so busy with all your films and projects, you still feel like you're having a private life, or there's not a lack of private life? Or...
Sometimes less than others. I mean, I'm dying to go on vacation. I really want to do some, I want to do you know, hiking or backpacking or sailing or canoeing or kayaking. You know, I'm dying to do that, and I can't get the time to do it, and it's starting to bug me.
Are you a person who can relax, like being really lazy, not doing anything? You're talking about hiking and doing something.
Yes, yeah, yeah, because I can do that. The weekends I don't do anything, nothing. I actually don't ever leave my house or get out of bed. It's like the pajama world, and I love that, you know. But I would really love to have 3 weeks where I could just, I don't know, where I could do something that, something, I don't know, where you feel like you climbed a mountain, or you got somewhere, you got a mile, or you got 3 miles, or whatever it was. You accomplished something, but that the task itself was completely meaningless. You know, that it wasn't like I accomplished something as in I won an award, or I did this, or I made a lot of money, but, you know, I went from here to there and then I came back. Big deal. You know, I just want to do this end thing, and I just want to do the thing. I don't really want to worry about what it means at the end of the day.
Does music play a strong part in your life? Are you a big fan of music?
Yeah.
What types of music?
I sort of listen to everything, you know. Everything, really. I mean, unfortunately, that's one of the things, boy, that bugs me about working too much, is that you lose your self-culture a little bit. So usually when I come back from a film, I see movies for weeks straight, and I do nothing but buy records. That's it. That's all I do is listen to records and see movies. Because you miss that when you're on location. You're like in some other world. You know? You don't even read the paper. So usually when I'm not working, when I'm unemployed, is my time for self-culture. And I haven't really had that much time.
Can you sing?
Yes.
Yes.
I did when I was younger. Doesn't mean that I want to be a singer. Don't want to be a singer. Yeah.
Are you a kickboxer? I heard that somewhere that you study kickboxing.
I did. I used to. I usually, once every 2 years, I do something else usually, and something that is absolutely all-encompassing. So that during that hour a day or 2 hours or whatever it is, I can't think of anything else. So sometimes it means learning language. Sometimes it means, the next thing that I really want to do is I'd like to learn to play piano. Now I may be saying that for the next 10 years, but that seems to be my new passion. I really want to do that. And when I did L'Homme à Tate, it's about a piano prodigy as well. And I got to see these young kids at Juilliard, these piano prodigies at Juilliard, and I didn't know anything about classical music, and it's a funny thing. It's like I just fell in love with it completely, and I have to do that. It's a funny thing.
I'm doing some research on a book right now on looping, and now that you...
Looping?
Yes, and now that you have, with Carl Gottlieb, and now that you have made the transition from in front of the camera to behind the camera, can you talk about that process a little bit?
The post-process?
Yeah,
a little
just
bit about
looping
that.
specifically.
Looping?
And
I used to dub. I dubbed Italian films when I was a child, and I did cartoons. And
Brady Kids?
No, I wasn't one of the Brady Kids.
In the cartoon.
No. I was Charlie and the Chan Clan is what I was, and then I did the Addams Family as well. I was a little boy in that, and a couple of a lot of Hanna-Barbera cartoons and stuff. So I did a lot of, I did radio too and stuff, and I always looped all my own movies when I was a kid, and it was one of the things that I got a lot of pleasure at, was being technically really good at it. And I love looping, because I think you can really help your performance, and it's a technical mastery. It's like crossword puzzles. It's like this dumb thing that you can do very technically. I love it.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever find that it absolutely enhanced a performance of yours?
Absolutely enhanced. Almost never, unless you're going back specifically to help a performance. I mean, I think you can do as good as you can do. Nothing is ever like the production track. Just the way it is. It's just never going to be like the production track. But what are you going to do? You're going to have people distracted by trains and airplanes and, radio mic rustling. And, So now that I'm directing my movie, I'm dealing with, what do you do in ADR and what don't you, and what do you leave alone, and what, So it's an interesting dilemma.
How much longer will you be involved in Little Man Tate, and do you have another acting job lined up?
No, I don't. And I'll be involved in it probably until May. So, for all the final stuff, with final mixes and dubs and special effects.
Do you enjoy the auteur role, as it were?
Love it. Auteur. Yeah, there is a. I didn't write the movie, so the actual writer is a man named Scott Frank. But I love it. I love it that it's. Ultimately in the beginning, I thought, oh well. The director has this vision, has this particular train, and everybody puts their little thing on the train. You get your little bag and you put it on the train, and when you do well, he allows you to put the bag on the train and you go in one particular direction. But ultimately, what I found once I started working with the film is that it has its own little tone, and I don't know that I have that much control over it now. It's like a kid, talks, it breathes, it walks, and I can't make it do things it doesn't want to do. It has its own little way about it, and. It's a funny thing that ultimately you talk about how much control you have over it, and then at a certain point you kind of give up and you let it do what it does, and you can't force it to do anything anymore.
Going back to music for a quick sec,
Yeah.
There's that power. You hear a song, you take it back to the first time you heard it, your first kiss, your first whatever.
Yeah.
Is there a song when you were growing up, you were young, maybe Beatles, Presley, I don't know, that you hear? Not that that you hear, it just takes you back.
Not really. One of the things I was talking about the other day that I really. I don't know why I was talking about this. My favorite instrument, trumpet, and I've been listening to a lot of jazz stuff recently for my soundtrack and stuff, and there's nothing like a trumpet. I don't know what I was going to say, but that's about it. I've been listening to Chet Baker, Miles Davis, and some interesting trumpet players. And somehow, something about that. That's it. I don't even have anything to say about it, but that's it. Nothing like a trumpet.
That's my quote.
Okay.
Have you ever thought about going back to school? You think you ever go back for a PhD or anything?
Oh God, my family asks me about this constantly. Like, well, maybe you better go back to school because you never know. This acting thing might not work out. I think about it sometimes, and I enjoyed school, but it wasn't. It got to a point when I did my GREs and everything, and I was thinking about going back to graduate school, and I had kind of scholarships and stuff lined up, and I went to see a movie that was very bad, and I got so uptight about how bad it was, and it could have been great, and they should have done this and that, and I couldn't sleep in anything. I mean, I was so uptight about this, and I thought, am I ever going to feel this way about like the presence of hands in the narrative of Henry James? And it wasn't that I wasn't good at it. I was good at it, but it didn't move me. And I'm kind of analytical and intellectual enough as it is, and I hate that side of me, and I would hate to feel like I was going to like imprison myself in that part of my brain. I would really, I need to do something in my life that's about being moved and moving people.
Maybe you could switch to another subject rather than literature, though. Maybe poli-sci or something.
Yeah, funnily enough, I mean, the reason that I love literature so much and why it was fiction, was specifically being able to deconstruct fiction into meaning and also have it move me, to really, to look at, Song of Solomon, which is my thesis, and to really look at it in, the book that I loved, that I cried over, and that I poured over every draft of, and then to see, how I restructured and what this particular meaning was for me. And that, I loved that. I mean, I loved going into fiction. And then when it started getting into, like, what so-and-so said about so-and-so, said about so-and-so, said about so-and-so, I was like, oh man, get me out of here. I can't spend my life doing this.
What was your thesis about?
I was on Toni Morrison's Song of Solomon, basically about Toni Morrison's work. And
Did you major in English?
no, literature. Literature, which is, it's more like a... No, comparative literature means you do it in 2 languages, which I could have done, but I opted not to, because I like the American stuff.
So that was Jodie Foster. We are back now. I really enjoyed hearing her talk about why she stuck with Hollywood, because she didn't feel passionate about anything else, even though she's educated and she's really very capable of doing other things. Personally, I find that really inspirational. At any time somebody is doing what they do because they love it, at any job, not just Hollywood, it's something that we should all strive for, and it just makes me respect Jodie Foster even more than I already did.
Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, I have no definitive answer to whether Jodie ever learned how to play the piano. I did scour the internet trying to find out, but that information is not out there. If she did, she apparently has not revealed it publicly.
Cool.
But if you have any information, please contact us. You can find us via our Facebook page.
And what is our Facebook page?
I don't remember.
Facebook.com/Matt and Greg.
Sure, that'll work.
That'll work.
And if it doesn't, it'll lead you somewhere else that's interesting.
Very good point. And that was Jodie Foster. That was an interview. You know what? Little postscript to my little thing is I actually was able to interview Jodie Foster in person at a round table for Panic Room. So that was.
And did you panic when you interviewed her?
I here's the thing.
Yes.
By then, I think it had been maybe 5 or 6 years since my realization that I wanted to do this. I was so burnt out by the time Panic Room went around that I did not get nervous. I did not enjoy the moment. I go, let's just let this. I enjoyed the movie. Let's just let these interviews be over.
This was one of those where you were looking at your watch, going, "How many more interviews do we have to do today?
Yes.
I'm hungry. I want to get a cookie.
Get a Four Seasons cookie, or eat the omelet and just go home, interview these people, record them, and then because as Matt look, I know this is inside baseball, but part of the thing that Matt and I used to do, Matt and Greg used to interview movie stars, but yes, we had to actually take these tapes, as you guys know, and turn them around for shows. So it was a big job for us. Now it's great.
Turn them around is an interesting phrase. We would need to go back to our offices and pull sound bites and write intros. And there was more to the job than just watching movies and talking to famous people.
Yes.
So yeah, we put in a lot of hours, but good memories.
Good. Very.
I miss it. I kind of wish I still had some of that.
Matt, is there anything else you want to say about Jodie Foster before we move on?
Oh God, no.
Okay. Very cool. Really. Okay.
You hit a nerve, Greg. I don't want to talk about it.
We're done with Jodie Foster. You know what I do miss, Matt? I do miss interviewing Anthony Hopkins, because I had the pleasure, even though I did not interview Anthony Hopkins for The Silence of the Lambs,
right.
I did interview him maybe 5 or 6 years ago for this movie, I think called The Right or something, The Last Right. And he is...
I think I talked to him for Legends of the Fall.
Oh, we did that? Oh, yes. We have to do that movie. That's a really interesting...
Sure.
That's a really
One of these days?
One of these days, definitely. But he was very well spoken. And that elocution is evident in this interview. Matt, you have a lot of things to say about Mr. Hopkins.
I have a couple of things to say.
Yeah.
All right. Well, as a small tease, you are going to hear some very unlikely inspirations for who Anthony Hopkins had in mind when he was formulating his idea of how to play Lecter. And that's all I'm going to say about that. But just look out for that soundbite. It's pretty funny. At one point in the junket, Barry Krutchik asks him about the 1968 film The Lion in Winter, which was his film debut. He was third billed behind Peter O'Toole and Katharine Hepburn, which is not a bad beginning. Other than that, though, there really isn't anything you need to know going into this in order to understand it better. But I do hope that everyone listening catches all of the insights into the character that he shares. I mean, his performance of Hannibal Lecter, as we've been saying, it's become so iconic. It's easy to forget about how much thinking and how many decisions went into the creation of it. We just know it now, and it just, like, it came out perfectly formed, and that's just what it is. But at the time, it took a lot of work. And Hopkins is really very forthcoming about how he arrived at what we all know so well. It's a really interesting interview, and it's almost like listening to a master class in acting. And most important of all, you're going to learn new things about looping. Now, we sort of skipped over. Did we want to do any bio? I mean, he's we all kind of know who he is.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, we know.
Maybe just a couple of highlights. You got it in front of you.
Couple highlights. I mean, most people in the MCU remember Hopkins as Odin. So recently, he's made
Thor's father.
Thor's dad, Odin. I mean, and also I personally liked him in the 2012 film Hitchcock, because he played obviously Alfred Hitchcock, and that's, even though a lot of people did not see that movie, I thought that movie was highly underrated, and he was great as the master of suspense. I mean, he's worked with Woody Allen in the 2010 film You Will Meet a Tall Dark Stranger, and in 2005 he starred in The World's Fastest Indian that received a lot of critical acclaim. So he's been, Mission Impossible 2. Of course, one of the movies that I think is worth a look, folks, is a little movie from 1998, which I think is highly underrated, Meet Joe Black. It's a 3-hour film, and it's, I believe, available on Amazon Prime. So, a lot of personal favorites, obviously the Merchant Ivory stuff, Howard's End, The Remains of the Day, Shadowlands. He's had quite the career. And Matt, you want to say something before we get to Mr. Hopkins?
I'm good.
You are good, and I am good, and hopefully you are good as we venture into...
Hopefully this interview will make you even better.
Yes. Good luck feeling better after listening to Anthony Hopkins in The Silence of the Lambs.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Okay. Good morning.
Morning.
Hi.
Did you have any misgivings about taking such a grisly role?
Misgivings?
Misgivings.
Oh,
you have a microphone.
Yeah, we have a microphone for everybody. We're going to pass that around.
Did you have any misgivings about taking such a grisly role? But it's not yet? No. We can hear.
I don't think we need
We don't need it. We don't need it.
okay. Oh, you mean for these to pick up? I can repeat your question. Did I have any misgivings about taking the role? No. I read it. My agent phoned me up. I was in London. This is 1989. I was doing a play in London, in Butterfly. My agent phoned me and said, you must read this script called The Silence of the Lambs. I said, what's it like? He said, it's a brilliant script. I said, is it an offer? He said, no, not yet, not quite. I said, well, I won't read it. He said, you must read it. No, I said, well, I don't want to read it and get disappointed. So he phoned me back a couple of days later. He said, yeah, it seems that it's going to be an offer, and Jonathan Demi's coming to London to see you, which Jonathan very kindly did. And I read the script that afternoon. And I thought it was such a brilliantly written script. I hadn't read the book, and I didn't know anything about Tom Harris's writing. Except I knew of Tom Harris. I'd seen Manhunter, the Red Dragon film. Yeah. I'd seen it on television then. And it was so well written. And Lecter was so vivid. I asked my agent, in fact, I said, why do they want me to play this part? He said, I don't know, don't ask questions, just, yes or no. I said, I read it, and it was an electrifying part. And for some reason, I was able to identify with it, not because I'm quirky like that, but I think those parts are very powerful parts, just like Shakespeare's Richard III or Shakespeare's Iago in Othello, or I once played Adolf Hitler in The Bunker. I don't have a propensity for evil, I hope, in that but I don't know. I sort of understood Lecter's mind, and I don't mean I understood it in an intellectual way. I understood it intuitively, and I don't understand why. I understand these things intuitively, but I didn't have any qualms about it. There was maybe a fleeting thought that maybe I shouldn't be part of something which is so satanic and so evil, because he is, in my mind, the personification of the devil, which is very seductive. And I suppose in human mythology, the dark forces in human nature are much more fascinating than the light. And I suppose that's what people like Carl Jung always address as, the shadow. And Freud addressed that. I'm getting into psychology now, but no, I didn't have any reservations, really. I think it's sort of, in a way, I've always been fascinated, actually, wondering why audiences respond in a way to parts like this. I played a man called Lambert Leroux in a play called Pravda by David Hare at the National Theatre, and he was a monster, newspaper magnate, and he was like everything out of the darkness of one's childhood dreams, the bogeyman. An absolute monster who said all the most unfashionable things. And during rehearsals, I said to David Hare, we're going to be roasted for this. But to our surprise, the audiences, and not just surprised, but I had a suspicious feeling that the audiences would like it. And I don't mean that in self-aggrandizement, because the part was so well written. But the audiences responded positively, and they rooted for him. And I think it's because in fiction or in literature or in movies, which is not reality at all, we are given a glimpse of that dark side of ourselves, and we can give ourselves a fright or hold our breaths, and then we can go out into the sunshine or go out and get popcorn or whatever, and go back to reality. And I think that's what it is. It helps us to identify something in ourselves. It's a long answer to a very short question.
Mr. Hopkins, your character is so mysterious, and since you have played it, I'm sure you understand it more than we could. Could you explain to us some more about the inner workings of his mind and the different stages he goes through in this film?
I don't understand any of it intellectually. My hunch was just to play it for what I could feel inside. I think when you're playing an evil part like Lecter, you mustn't play evil. You have to play the opposite, in fact. If you're playing Richard III, you have to look for the charm, the attractive quality buried in there. And with Lecter, I just thought, the part was so written in such a, I can't say a charming way, but what he says is so witty and so clever, and so he is 4 moves ahead of everyone else. And so I just went to play the humour. But it's one of those things when I knew what he looked like. I knew the sound of the voice when I first read it. And for some strange reason, I thought of Katharine Hepburn and Truman Capote. That's what came into my mind. And I wanted to get a kind of a sexual ambivalence about the man. That he's neither one thing or the other, but he's everything. And I think in ambivalence there is power. It's like in, it's in masculinity you have the female, and all those peculiar combinations. And I think with Lecter he's a one-off. He's an isolated figure who is ambivalent. And I remember the first day working with Jonathan Demme, I'd heard so much about him, and I'd seen one of his films before, Something Wild. And I'd heard that he was a terrific guy to work with, but I thought, when you're an actor, you're going in working with the director, you have to make sure that you don't get swamped by your own ego and start taking over and directing the film. But I did Jonathan asked me, because he's such a good director. He's the sort of director who swaps ideas with you, but he's always in control. And he asked me, he said, "How do you feel about the first time we see Lecter?" He said, "Because you're getting such a build-up. You're getting more of a build-up with Omar Sharif and Lawrence of Arabia." He said, "It's such a build-up, to be by the time she gets to the cell. Do you think you'd be lying on the bench?" And I just had a hunch. The night before, I said, what I'd like to do, if you don't mind my suggesting this, I said, I'd like to be seen standing right in the middle of the cell, waiting for her, so that I know she's there, I know she's coming. And it's like that dark fantasy, when you're a child and you come into a room and you know you're not alone, and you look on the wall next to you is a huge spider. Yeah. And that's what I was always obsessed when I was a child, of going into a room in a dream, and the room is empty with old wallpaper on it, and I know there's something terrifying in there. And it was a recurring dream I had as a child, and I sometimes get it now. I have a recurring dream that I'm in a house where there is something terrifying outside, and I'm in the house and I've discovered that some of the doors are unlocked and one is open, and I wake up from the dream. So that's that's an image that was created for me about Lecter, that when she's coming down the corridor, he's already made eye contact with her and he says, "Good morning." So I wanted to give the audience a fright.
What about nightmares after or during the shooting?
No.
Nothing?
No, we just had a laugh all the way through. It was a lot. Well, we had, you have to take it. After all, you can't. If I had probed all the depths and got so involved in it, it would have been unspeakable, really. I mean, it's not necessary. I mean, for my money, I don't think acting is that complicated. That's my opinion about acting for myself, not about other actors. Some actors make a great deal of, doing tremendous research, and that's good for them. For me, I can't do it.
Could you talk a little bit about working with Jodie Foster?
She's wonderful. She's very, very an excellent actress, and she's what I liked so much about her was that her concentration, her cool. Now this sounds, yes, cool professionalism. There's nothing demonstrative there. She comes in, she doesn't like to give it a, full performance during the rehearsal. And Jonathan, I'm glad to say, doesn't like too much rehearsal, He trusted the actors that they know their lines, which is basically what it's all about. And then you just have a walkthrough of it, make a couple of adjustments, swap a few ideas and say, how about this, doing that, moving it around the cell. You say, what do you want to do? Why didn't you move up to the wall at that point, and then move back and all that. So it's very easy. But working with her was so refreshing, because she, like all good actresses, all really great actresses and really talented people, they're very efficient, and she comes in, does her job, does it well, and does it extraordinarily well. Does it exceptionally well. And it's so easy, there's no sweat, no big deal. And that's nice, it's easy to work that way. So you don't have to strain, you don't have to get tense. So you can actually afford to have a laugh, go off and have a coffee, have a joke. Because otherwise it becomes heavy, and some people like to make it heavy, and she doesn't, thank goodness.
How do you keep from overplaying a role such as Lecter? Were there takes where you said, I went too far, let's bring it back a step? He's so evil, it's got to be easy to just overdo it.
Well, there was a time when Jonathan and I had, I was a bit concerned. There's a scene where he shouts at her when she's comes back, and he calls her back to his, and he says, go and find whatever, and he said, go now. And I wanted to do it quietly, I wanted to do it more icy. And Jonathan said, I want you to do it really as if he's suddenly got lost his marbles. And I was a bit concerned about it. And in fact, I phoned him up the night after we did that. And I said, I'm a little bit dubious about that. I said, because we did two versions. He said, well, trust me, as directors was. He said, trust me. He said, I think it's going to work. I said, okay. And I didn't see the dailies the next day because I was doing something else. And he assured me that it worked. And I'm glad it seemed to work. The only, because I think when you shout on camera, when you shout on screen, when you start acting, overacting, it looks terrible. And it is terrible. Because the camera picks up all that stuff. So because with his nursing and with his direction, I said, well, when we did the scene that way, he said, okay, well, let's work it out. He said, how can you do it? I said, well, I can do it very fast, but not too loud, and then just go now. So that, it's, with the outburst of noise comes very quick and fast, like a cannon shot, But that's the only time I was a little nervous about, losing restraint. Because the frightening thing, I think what you have to do when you're acting, if you want to frighten an audience, you have to frighten yourself in a way. You have to have an image which is so frightening for yourself, and then project that to an audience or to the camera. And the thing that really got me going about the part was his physical, emotional, mental restraint. 8 years in this block, in this room, in this coffin. He's like a praying mantis. He's like, he doesn't move at all. Like, I'm fascinated by the reptile world. They get like a chameleon can wait for hours and suddenly go boom. And I think that's what I wanted to get, that's what I wanted to create. And also, the very sound of the word, of the name Lecter, had an effect on my inner working somehow. Hannibal Lecter. Lecter sounds like a shiny ebony box full of killing instruments. And I saw him, and when I was reading the part, I closed my eyes, and I close my eyes, and I repeat the name Lecter, Hannibal Lecter. And I gradually built a picture of him sitting in his office in Baltimore as a psychiatrist, dressed in a black suit, black tie, white shirt, immaculate, playing Bach on the sound system while he's interviewing patients, and black shiny shoes, a lethal machine in total control, no pity, absolute pitilessness, like the alien, but highly civilized, so sane in fact that he's flipped over into insanity. There's a wonderful thing in James Bond, in one of those James Bond movies, where I think it's Goldfinger or Blofeld, when James Bond says to him, "Of course you know you're mad." He said, "No, Mr. Bond, let's say we're abnormally sane." And of course, people who will believe they're absolutely sane are nuts.
You talk about the appeal to audiences of this kind of genre. Do you yourself like being scared to death by books, films, whatever? How do you feel about this?
Yes, I mean, I think if there's gore and just indiscriminate sort of bloodshed on screen, I think that's awful. But I think Psycho was one that really scared me. And what was the other one? With Mike Douglas and Fatal Attraction. And some of the Hitchcock movies like Rear Window. Because you always have a feeling of unease. But Psycho especially was so terrifying because it's psychological terror. I mean, when Vera Miles says to her boyfriend, before she goes up into the house, she says, "I'm going up there, what can an old woman do to me?" And the whole audience, "Don't go in the house," because she's going into our nightmares. She's going right into the darkness of our own minds. And I think Hitchcock was quoted as saying, he said, somebody asked him, he said, "Why are you fascinated? Why do you think audiences are fascinated by horror films or fearful films?" And he says, "Well, what do we do when we see a baby? We go, boo." He said, "There's something in us there." But no, I like movies, and I like tense movies. I like exciting movies, like that great French movie, Les Diaboliques. That was another scary movie. Yeah.
How do you think your character related to the character of Jodie Foster played? At the beginning they say, well, you remind him of his victims, so you probably found her attractive and something else, but then she said afterwards, "He wouldn't go after me." So how do you relate?
I think he has a lot of... I think it amuses him that this young, frail... Well, I mean, Jodie's not a big, strapping woman. I mean, she's compact and small, and I think this vulnerable woman comes in to see him. Of all people, they send is this young woman, and I think it amuses him that she actually stands there when everyone else is terrified of him, and she actually confronts him, and I think he admires her, and he becomes very fond of her, and in his own strange way loves her in a way, but makes a deal with her. Like Bergman's Seventh Seal, they play a game together, and he's quid pro quo, and I think he just admires her, and he has no intention of harming her. I projected in my own fantasy, if Tom Harris writes the next book, which he's doing apparently, not that I have anything to do with it, but I had a kind of fantasy in my own mind that I didn't know how Tom Harris was going to write his book. But if I were writing it, if I were a writer, say, I would have Lecter making a deal with Clarice Starling and saying, "You've got to kill me, you've got to destroy me, but I'm going to come after you, and I'm going to give you a chance. I'm going to outwit you, and I'm going to outsmart you, so you'd better be really clever, because I want you to kill me. But you make one false move, and I'll kill you." And I think that's what I'd like to say, you know, if that's what, that he is a man who is that mad. He was, he put himself right on the edge.
Did you do any kind of research for a role?
No. Just learn the lines. And I can't do much research. I read Truman Capote's In Cold Blood, and which I thought was a frightening book. But no, I don't analyze very much. If I get a strong hunch about a part, I'll just go ahead and learn it and do it. All I literally do is learn the lines, get so used to them. It's very anti-Stanislavski, that, but I mean, I do that because I think it's the way I work, you know, and I keep it very simple, and it seems to operate of its own level, you know.
How does this film experience compare with your film debut in '68, Lion in Winter? Like, what's changed since then?
What's changed? I'm 20 odd years older, 22 years older. Well, that was an experience working with Hepburn and O'Toole. They were two gigantic movie stars, and I'd never seen a film camera before. So that was my debut, and it was pretty big stuff to be working with them. They were very nice, you know. O'Toole was terrific to work with, and Hepburn was very helpful. And there were the three young actors, myself, John Castle, Timothy Dalton, and Nigel Terry, four of us. And she and O'Toole were just all the time, you know, very helpful, because we didn't know. I mean, Catherine Hepburn said, constantly said to me, she said, "Don't act." I said, well, what do I do? She said, just speak the lines. She said, you don't let the camera do it. And that was the first lesson I had about acting from on camera. It was from Catherine Hepburn. And since then, I've been trying to hone it down and kind of keep it simple, which comes back, you know, that question of restraint on camera. You have to really love the camera and like the camera and respect the camera and know that it's an instrument that will either make you or break you, because it'll pick up all the innuendos and all the falseness. So the best thing is to just keep it very contained.
On the other hand, the operations of your character in the movie are all staged in the way that...
Sorry?
On the other hand, all the operations of your character in the movie seem to be staged in a way that he's in a stage thing to the audience. Everybody's watching him, he's in a certain place, and everybody's watching him. So there would be a combination of both, maybe theater and movie acting.
I don't think there's that great deal of difference. I was talking to somebody last night about. I think really I think when we're starting out as an actor, and I looking at young wonderful actors, you know, just now becoming all big stars and all that, it's naturalism and realism is all very fine, you know, it's terrific to look, but finally you have to find a kind of style. It's a dirty word, I know, but you have to find a way, you have to find a style, you have to divide your mind, you have to know what you're doing, you have to know your effect. Now, with all due respect to Lee Strasberg, my daughter's working at the Strasberg studio, but with all due respect to realism and probing and all that, which is all very necessary, you still have to develop a style which is clear. I mean, you look at your great American actors like Spencer Tracy and Humphrey Bogart, you know, the great movie stars. They may not have been playing King Lear and all that stuff, who cares? But they were, as Kazan said about so many of the great American actors, they may have had a small range, but in that range they were terrific. Like Brando, although Brando was an extraordinary actor, and people like Spencer Tracy and, you know, you can go through Miss Barbara Stanwyck and people like that. They had a great style. Betty Davis, wonderful style. And I think there's more to learn from them than there is from, dare I say, well, there's some wonderful, new generation of actors. But I think it's always worth watching people like Burt Lancaster and people like that who know how to use the camera. They learn their trade, they learn their craft, they learn their business in front of the camera in the studios. And I think it's wonderful to watch them. And, you know, because when you watch them, the hallmark of all their work is economy and their powerful image that they portray. In Britain, there tends to be an attitude, it's not so prevalent now, but an attitude of rather dismissing film as a rather cheap art. Not so much now because most actors want to be in films, but there used to be an attitude until fairly recently, in the last 10, 15 years, of saying, yes, but it's not really acting, is it? Well, that's a big untruth, you know. It is acting. It's a wonderful medium.
Talking a little bit about the techniques of acting and so on, with regards to the technique of looping, did you ever find when you were ever working that looping enhanced or took away from a performance, or do you have a story you could share about working on a film in post?
It enhances. I think it's a good chance to improve your performance. You can't improve the performance, but I mean, you can vocally improve something. Yeah, I mean, if you except if it's on an Italian film. I worked on one Italian film. You loop everything, which is a bit of a pain. But hopefully you're not going to have to loop everything, because you've done all your work, and some of it is impossible to loop if it's all very real and spontaneous. And if you've got a good sound guy on the set, you're okay. But usually street scenes and stuff like that, or maybe where sound is bad, you can actually enhance it. I think it's good. I know a lot of actors don't like it, but I sound so virtuous. But I enjoy looping. I mean, I enjoyed it. I just enjoy being around movies.
Which Shakespearean character do you find the most fascinating, and which that you haven't played would you like to play?
I don't want to play any more Shakespeare.
No more Shakespeare?
No, I played Lear, and it was sort of okay. I did about 70% of it. I got up the hill towards conquering it a bit. I'd like to have another go at it in about another 10 years' time, maybe. I don't know. I mean, everyone says, you've got to do Shakespeare. At the moment, I'm not too interested in doing that, because it's such hard work. I did 100 performances of Lear and Mark Antony and Antony and Cleopatra all at the same time in over a period of 2 years at the National, and I wouldn't have missed it. I'm glad I did it. But it's pretty hard work. I mean, it really does take all your skill and energy, and I bit off too much. I bit off more than I could chew. I mean, I was doing two massive parts at the same time, and I know I take comfort that many actors who've done that always come a cropper, so I'm not alone there. But the lesson in that for me is to not take on so much. If I do Lear, I think those plays like Lear and Antony, I think they ought to be performed in small theatres, as Shakespeare wrote them for small theatres like the Globe and the Rose Theatre. But in the National Theatre, in the Olivia Theatre, which is a huge barn of a place, seats about 1,200, 1,400 people. It's a big problem, because you've got a big stage and it's like a panoramic stage, so you have to develop a style of acting which is really working in stereophonic sound. You have to start a line here and spray the whole audience with it, because they up there can't hear. It's very weird, so you have to constantly be pushing. It's good exercise. I mean, it's a great muscular feat, to act on those stages, but I think they ought to put them in smaller theatres. If I had a go at Lear again, I'd like to do it in a 500-seater or something like that.
What's your next film project?
I'm doing a movie with Vanessa Redgrave, Howard's End. E.M. Forster, the guy who wrote Room with a View, and the same lot, Merchant Ivory, James Merchant. James Ivory.
You mean Room with a View? The same authors?
Same authors, the same director, Ishmael Merchant Company.
We've been hearing.
The title?
Yeah.
Howard's End, E.M. Forster.
And what will you be playing?
The father. I can't remember his name at the moment. I'm also doing a film called Free Jack with Mick Jagger in Atlanta in April, but that's a very quick film.
Well, can you talk about working with Mick Jagger, or?
No, I don't know anything about it yet. My agent's sort of working on it.
Your impressions of Mick Jagger?
I've never met him.
Never met him?
I think he's great. A great pop star. No, I don't know him.
What's the name of the film?
Free Jack.
What's it about?
I don't know yet. My agent's just working on it. So.
Do you live in England or America? Or
London. Well, I used to live in America. I lived in Los Angeles for 9 to 10 years, and I went back eventually because I was working on American films like The Bounty with an English cast, and every time I did something for CBS or for Orion or whatever, I seemed to be going back over towards England or Europe. And so one day I thought, well, my wife was more keen to go back to England. She said, well, we seem to be back here, maybe the writing's on the wall. So we sold up and went back there. But I miss America very much. I love working here and I love being here. But I got the best of both worlds. I travel over here. And, but I had a good time, and it's nice to be back in London, I suppose. But I'm very restless. I'm never too content wherever I'm placed. I like to keep moving.
I read for Italy. What was the title of the film that you did in Italy, you said?
Oh, it was Mussolini and I. It was with Bob Hoskins as Mussolini.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Was that a long time ago? Or
But yeah, it was about 6-7 years ago. It was okay. It was fun. You know, I loved working in Rome. And have you? Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, folks, we are back from Anthony Hopkins.
Hello again.
Hello. Hi, Matt. How are you?
Hey, Greg. When did you get here?
Yeah, the show is almost finished. Do you have any postscripts regarding Anthony Hopkins, sir?
I do have a couple. He said that he wasn't interested in doing any more Shakespeare. And indeed, in the following 28 years, he stayed almost true to his word. The one exception was foreshadowed in the rest of his answer. He said he wouldn't mind playing King Lear again, and sure enough, he has. It took him a little longer to get to it than the 10 years he predicted, but in 2018, he did play Lear in a TV movie made for Amazon Prime, alongside Jim Broadbent, Emma Thompson, and Emily Watson. Now, I really liked Hopkins' idea for a sequel to The Silence of the Lambs. I think that probably would have made a better movie than the sequel they eventually wound up with, which was the 2001 film Hannibal. If you remember, Greg, Jodie Foster, director Jonathan Demme, and screenwriter Ted Talley all turned that film down, so it was directed by Ridley Scott, who is not a bad replacement.
No.
Clarice Starling was played by Julianne Moore, and it was written by David Mamet and Steven Zalian. Now, all those guys are really talented people, but critical response for the sequel was mixed. The box office, though, was pretty good. It earned a worldwide total of $351 million, which, of course, put dollar signs into Hollywood's eyes, so it was followed by two prequels, Red Dragon in 2002, where Anthony Hopkins reprised the role yet again, and then Hannibal Rising in 2007, where he didn't.
Yeah, and I actually did the junket for Hannibal Rising, and that was...
And how was that?
It was a really not unmemorable experience. So that movie, if I recall...
What do you remember about that experience, Greg?
Funny. I remember one thing, though. I think Gong Li, she's an Asian actress, she was actually in that movie, and I really enjoyed interviewing Gong Li, who I love and adore. But that's it. The movie itself was not very, very good. And I never got around, Matt, to actually watching Hannibal, the show, the series. So
yeah, me neither.
Yeah, it got its share of acclaim, but I'd like to probably look. You and I both love watching movies, so maybe if I ever get the time, I'll go watch that series, because there was so much acclaim, so much critical acclaim behind it, if I recall. Yes. So
that wraps up Silence of the Lambs.
Yes, that wraps up the Silence of the Lambs. Next one, it should be a very big ring. You're gonna put a ring around it.
So you must have liked it.
I did.
So you put a ring on it. So coming up on our next episode is actually, it's one of my favorite movies of all time. This is The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Rings, which is part 1 of the trilogy.
Right.
So I'm excited about that. I'm excited to share all these great interviews with you. We got almost everyone in the cast.
We're gonna sign off now, but before we sign off, please
tell them what our webpage is.
Our webpage is mattandgregpodcast.com. You can reach us via that website.
Perfect. Facebook,
you can go facebook.com/Matt and Greg. We would love to hear your reviews, your thoughts on the episodes, and we're also on YouTube, Matt.
Well, we do 2 versions of the show. It's the same audio, but on YouTube, there's a video component where you can see pictures of the people who are talking. The audio-only version is available wherever podcasts are, so you can go to iTunes or Google Play or Stitcher or whatever it is that you use and just run a search on the name of the show, which is Matt and Greg Used to Interview Movie Stars. You'll find us. Look for the black and white picture of the microphone, and you can subscribe, so all of the new interviews will download directly to your phone. You can listen to it while you drive, while you jog, wherever you want. And before we go, Greg, why don't you tell us about Cinematics and Deepest Dream?
Oh yeah, well, listeners, if you want, if you're in the need for some more entertainment news, check out my site deepestdream.com, and my other podcast is called Cinematics. It's cinema and addicts, just one A, Cinematics, and I've been doing that
with a couple of D's. It's not addicts. It's not like cinematics.
Yes.
Which is how you would spell the word normally. It's a pun. It's addicts. Like you're addicted. So ADD.
Yeah, like me and Matt we're both addicted to cinema. So Thank you, Matt, for that little plug. Matt, do you want to plug something else on your end?
I have nothing to plug. I have nothing going on. This is the crux of my life right here.
Okay, that does not. He's a great editor, folks. But
and you'll know because I'll edit that out.
He's gonna edit that out. Okay, folks, we will see you next month for the one ring that'll save them all: The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. Matt, take us home.
You know, I used to wear a ring. It didn't save anything.
Oh boy. See you guys. Bye.
We now return you to your regularly scheduled life.